Let's get this right out in front. I'm what you'd call a Sigma male. No cap, just facts. I got my style on lock. I'm buttery with the ladies. My boys want to be me, and my vibes always pass the check. Hell, I'm so Sigma, my dad never bothered to come back with milk. He knew he couldn't stand beside an alpha male like me, so why bother? It's cool, though. My mom is the best, and the bands I make from my zine cast on the manosphere keep us comf AF. I mean, she's got an OnlyFans, but she only sells feet pics, so it's classy. So when this rando, this rizzless chud, DMs me on Snap and tells me my vibes are stale, but that he can fix me, I scoffed into my Stanley. This beta wants to Charleston with a Sigma like me? For real, for real? Nah, I'd win. This bald head says to meet him on Ohio Boulevard at midnight, and that he can take my game to the next level. He's capping, for real, but could he be dead ass? A true Sigma's always evolving, peaking game and studying vibes, so I owed it to myself to check his vibes in person. His profile pic looked weak, some chud who probably doesn't even edge, and I wasn't sweating him. I had time, so I got about my morning routine of mewing, gooning, and generally posting my workouts to Insta. As an influencer, it's important for people to know when I'm maxing. They need that kind of positivity in their lives, if they're ever going to be on my level. I had a Feastable for lunch, gotta support the OGs, and put a Feastable bar in my pocket for later. I decided to go live and play a modest 8.5 hours of Roblox. You know, for the fans. And when I looked down, I realized I'd almost missed my yap sesh with the Ohio Rizzler. Ha! Like he could be for real, the Ohio Rizzler, I thought, as I goon maxed before getting an Uber to the deets he'd sent me. So I caught an Uber to Ohio Avenue, and the driver was some boomer who yapped about how he'd been in Korea or some shit. Bozo thinks I don't know. You can't go to Korea, 'cause that weird haircut dude says so. Like I'm a buster. Pfft, old heads. You should be careful, he said, testing my vibes. I dropped a kid your age off there last week. They found him in an alley nearby, and the scene wasn't pretty. Yap, boomer, I said, tipping 12% before heading off to my meeting of the vibes. I must say, I looked fresh. I had my Logan Paul merch on, sweats and hoodie, and my Crocs were already in sports mode, in case this Rizzler was a creepler instead. I had my Mr. Beast brand mace too, thanks Jimmy, and all that mewing had given me an even chadlier chin than usual. The guy was in for a shock. I don't think he had peeped my Insta and realized I go to the gym 3 times a week and totally work out between photo sessions. I checked my phone, it was 11:59, and I was starting to think this guy wouldn't show when I peeped something from up the way. He was chuggy AF, no cap. Homie low-key looked like the Riddler, but after a glow-up maybe. His threads were giving stale vibes, but there was something about him that was a mood. Round hat, ditty coat, and tapered pants. Straight up fiddle-dee-dees on his grippers, buckles and all that, and his cane was pretty cringe with that skull on it. He was coming towards me like he was looking for hands, but I checked my vibe and found my chill. If bro wanted me shook, he was going to discover I was built different. Period T. You, Sigma Chad 42069, he said, his voice giving big creep energy. Facts, you the so-called Rizzler of Ohio Street? He swooped his hand out as if he was saying obvi. What do your eyes tell you, son? Looks like I crept out of my goon cave to share vibes with some buster, cuz. You look like a straight L, some rizzless chud without a white toe to be seen on your bitch. I suppose you'd have to ask your mother about her toes, he said, crossing his arms and grinning. Oh, God! That's almost hands, brah. Step then and see what happens. Aight, say less, I thought. I prepared to rock his shit with an absolute yeetly-inducing right hook. But as I checked yes on gorilla mode, I found the Rizzler had already stepped out. Gone quicker than my dad on a milk run, the Rizzler was nowhere to be peeped. But then, when that cane came down hard behind me, I turned to see him standing where I had stood. Fake, I breathed. No fact check needed. I should have ate. Looks like you busted instead, the Rizzler of Ohio Street said, eyeing me like a snack. Speaking of bustin', I think it's my turn to do some clapping. Nah, I said, unsubscribe. And I dashed. His vibes were cooked. I could feel his aura from here, and unless I wanted to get diddied, I needed to dip hard. The buildings zoomed past mad fast while I dipped, trying to bounce from this weird ass as I bolted. Couldn't even peep him trailing. Those kicks should have been loud AF, but when I looked back, he was just vibing mad smooth, staying close. Ain't no way. How you pulling these vibes? I yapped, mad shook. I suppose you could say I'm built different, the Rizzler said. I was just sprinting, no cap, when a whip rolled up to the light. I opted hop in, but the closer I got, I peeped it wasn't just any ride. It was the same cab I rolled in with. The old dude had said this creep was sus. Maybe he could vibe check me. I banged on the door like, I need help. But as the Rizzler's hand hit my shoulder, I legit knew I was donezo. End of the line, Sigma. Looks like it's time to get clapped for real. But the old guy had other machinations. He cranked the window down, flexing on the Rizzler while yelling for him to bounce. Rizzler backed off, dodging that smoke, and I seized the moment to push the chuggy guy off me. He tripped back, and I hopped in the whip, and we skirted out of there. The old dude asked if I was lit, and I said I was vibing, before clocking who was chilling on the road in front of us. It was the Rizzler. He was vibing there, arms out like he was going to snag the whip, but the old dude just gassed it and rolled right over him. Built different or nah, the Rizzler got bodied by the cab, and we dipped while I was begging him to take me home, for real. I peeped at the back window, but the dude wasn't chilling in the street no more. Didn't vibe with that, but I dipped, so that was fire. The old head said to ring the cops, but nah, too much drama. We made it out, that was the move, so I said I just wanted to chill at the crib. He nodded, dropped me at the house, telling me to be low-key next time. I said bet, then hit the sack. What a wild night, for real, for real. Next day, I woke up to the brekkie aroma. Mom was MIA when I got back, so I guess she was out vibing late. I slid to the kitchen, keeping last night low-key so Mom didn't trip. Some dude was at the stove, dripped in my mom's bathrobe, and nothing else. I was like, who dis? And he whipped around, giving me a mad scare. It was the Rizzler of Ohio Street. Hey, yo, WTF, how'd you slide into my crib? I asked. But Mom slid in and dropped the tea about that. There you are, Sigma. I'm so glad you met Mr. Ohio. We met last night, and well, one thing led to another, and he came home with me. He's just so charming, Sigma. I was putty in his hands. I hear that all the time, the Rizzler yapped, smooching her neck while peeping his aura shift. But I think if you would have me, I could finally be a one-woman man. Oh, you, she said, peeping the time. I've got to go. I'll see you boys tonight. Love you. She dipped out, rocking her open-toed kicks, and I was low-key shook. For real, for real. Her toes were slaying fresh, snow-white vibes. He dropped a plate in front of me, like bacon and eggs on fleek, toast vibing. Had to say, it hit different. They tied the knot last week, big vibes and all, and now the Rizzler from Ohio is my stepfather. No cap. So I guess what I'm yapping, chat, is am I cooked or what? Hey everyone, it's Dr. Plague, just popping in at the end here to tell you happy April Fool's Day, and I hope you enjoyed my Gen Alpha rendition of a creepypasta. If you understood more than 2 sentences of that, then I'm glad. If not, you'll probably have to feed it into Google Translate like I did when I wrote it. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you'll be back very soon. Let's roll those credits. I never understood the term phantom limb before now. I'm no soldier. I didn't lose my arm in a battle or saving someone or doing anything heroic or useful. I lost it due to a series of unlucky events. I was hiking in the woods with some friends, doing some very light rock climbing, and when I slipped, I sliced my arm before the rope caught me. I was more relieved when my legs didn't get broken than I was worried about my arm, so I slapped a bandana on it and kept going. We camped the weekend on the ground, but I put ointment on it and I tried to keep it clean. A friend of mine told me Sunday as we piled into our cars that I should keep an eye on the wound. Those red marks look bad, and there's no telling what you could have picked up out here. I told him I'd be careful, and when I got home, I took some Tylenol and put a Band-Aid on it. I was feeling pretty tired, which was understandable since I'd been hiking all weekend. I told myself I'd go to bed and turn the air up a little bit because I was feeling hot. I figured I'd be back to business as usual the next day. Instead, I woke up in the middle of the night with a pounding headache and a high fever. I took more Tylenol, but I just couldn't get back to sleep. I was sweating and headachy, and finally I got up and went to watch TV. I called out of work when 6 o'clock came around, and I only felt worse. I could tell something was wrong, but I thought maybe I'd just picked up a bug or something. It wasn't until I went to wipe the sweat off my forehead that I saw the angry red lines running up my arm. They were worse than they'd been the day before, and I got shakily to my feet and stumbled into the bathroom. I ran myself a bath and scrubbed at the arm, but the cut was looking worse than ever. It was angry and infected, the red lines running towards my shoulder, and after drying off, I decided it might be best to head to the ER. I wasn't sure what was wrong. I'm certainly no doctor, but I knew that wasn't normal. I sat in the ER for about 4 hours, only to find out that the cut on my arm was infected. "We want to keep you for a few days and run some tests," the doctor said. "We're concerned about the fever and the apparent onset of symptoms." 2 days later, I got more bad news. My time in the hospital had been far from beneficial. Whatever I had picked up in the woods had been supplemented by a nasty case of MRSA. While I had laid in a bed, eating hospital food and running my insurance up, I'd been exposed to a pretty nasty strain, and it had my arm redder and sorer than ever. By Friday, they were saying it wasn't affected by the antibiotics. By the following Monday, they were talking about amputation. "It's just spreading too quickly, sir. If we don't remove it, you could be looking at a nasty blood infection pretty soon. And we want to get it before you lose the shoulder, too." The hospital had offered to cover the surgery, probably because my insurance was leaning on them for something I had picked up at the hospital, and I seemed to be out of options. As little as I wanted to learn to live with one arm, I didn't really see any way out of it. I agreed, and by Wednesday, I woke up short an arm. They had pushed it ahead, afraid my condition would get worse, and as I looked down at the place where my healthy arm had been a week ago, I wasn't really sure how I felt about it. They had me on all kinds of things, and at first I thought that was why I was having the dreams. I woke up Thursday night with the strangest feeling in my missing arm that I'd ever felt. It was like I could feel something. Every finger flex, every follicle of hair, the cold feeling of tile under my fingers, and even the pressure of my missing elbow. It was so weird, like when your leg falls asleep, but I don't know. I don't really have a way to describe it. It was like the arm was there, but it wasn't. That in of itself would have been weird enough, but as I lay there in the darkened hospital room, I could hear something coming up the hall. It was a scampering sound, like a rat or a small dog. It wasn't a clicking like claws, but a thumping, like something with little feet coming up the hallway. Thump, 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 thump. I just lay there, eyes on the open doorway, as my breathing sped up. What was that sound? Had to be a nurse cart or some kind of equipment, but I couldn't think of what could be making that noise. All I could equate it to again was the feet of a very small animal. Thump, 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 thump. Why would a small animal be in a hospital? Thump, 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 thump. Couldn't be that. One of the nurses would have seen it and put it out. I looked at the clock and saw that it was past midnight. Who would be walking a dog up the corridor this late at... It came into the doorway, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. It was my arm, my hand, all of it. It was standing there in the door, its shadow trailing into the room. It was perched up on its fingers like Thing from the Addams Family, the dark hairs on my arm looking curly in the low light. It didn't have eyes, but I felt it like it was watching me, asking me why I had removed it from my body. The wound was gone, the red veins were gone too, and as I found my breath, I started screaming. I was confused and unsure of what was happening, and as the nurse came running, I tried to explain to them what was going on. I told them what I had seen, even pointed at the doorway where it had been, but she just smiled and patted my shoulder. "It's the meds, dearie. They make people see all kinds of weird things. I can assure you that if there was a detached human arm wandering around, somebody would have seen it." I looked back at the doorway, but it was gone. I suppose it would have had to be, or she would have seen it. I laughed, thinking it was just a nightmare, and told her I was sorry for scaring her. She assured me that it was okay and headed back to the nurse's station, leaving me to snuggle down under my blankets and try to get back to sleep. I was just working down back towards sleep when I heard the drumming of the fingers on my nightstand. I'd pulled the covers over my head, but through the thin hospital coverings I could see a shadow of something sitting on the standing tray beside my bed. It was drumming impatiently, its non-eyes boring into me as I peeked, and I wondered where it had been hiding while the nurse was there. Thump, 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 thump. I could hear each individual finger as it bounced off the wood, hear the crackling of knuckles and the creaking of bones. It was seeing me as I was seeing it, and it seemed angry. What did it want? Did it want to hurt me? Even as I wondered, I could still feel those there or not there feelings in my missing hand. It's weird to feel an arm and a hand that's not there anymore, to feel the fingers drumming and see those fingers drumming across from you. It almost made me feel a little dizzy, like seeing the magic picture in one of those books. Thump, 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 thump. I hunkered under my blanket, the old bastion of protection from the monsters, and wondered how long I'd have to hide here. Was someone going to come in and see the hand as it drummed there? Could they see it? Surely it couldn't be real. I was imagining things. I was having an adverse reaction to the medication or something. I'd wake up and discover that this was all a dream. I'd wake up and find out that all of this had been a dream, and I was still out camping with my friends. I waited to wake up or to have a nurse come in, but the longer the drumming of those phantom fingers went on, the less sure I was that it was a dream. What if I had angered my arm by having it removed? What if this was just my life now? My head was pounding, and I felt like my vision might be blurry. I wasn't well. This couldn't be real, but the longer I lay there trying to convince myself of that, the louder the drumming became. Thump, 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 thump. I was getting frustrated. My teeth were grinding together as the drumming of those fingers grated at me. I couldn't take it much longer. It was just a hand. I still had one of them, and I wasn't going to let it torment me for no reason. I threw the covers back, waiting for it to just vanish once I was giving it my full attention. But it remained substantial. It was a slightly tanned arm, covered in coarse black hair, glaring at me with its lack of eyes. "What?" I growled. "What do you want? Why are you here?" Our staring contest was cut short, however, as the lights came up suddenly, and I heard someone coming in through the front door. "Good morning. How are you feeling this morning?" I turned to see my doctor coming in, and I realized it was no longer gloomy in the hallway. The sun was coming up now, a pink line against the window, and when I glanced back at the nightstand, the hand was gone. "Are you okay?" she asked, putting a hand to my forehead. "You do feel warm. Are you feeling dizzy at all?" She looked into my eyes, but before I could answer, there was a sound like fingertips on glass. Thump, 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 thump. I looked up, and there it was. It was behind the glass, standing on the edge of the windowsill, with nothing below it but pavement. The wind was rustling those arm hairs, but it was the lack of eyes that kept boring holes into me, that drove me to the edge. The doctor jumped when I started screaming, pointing at the window as she called people in to restrain me. I was flailing, pointing at the window and trying to articulate what I was seeing, but they didn't care. The orderlies had my remaining hand in restraints pretty quickly, and they were administering something into my IV to help with my fever. "You're too hot," the doctor was saying, trying to calm me down. You've got a fever. We've got to get your fever down before it does you harm. Just relax. Nothing's going to hurt you. You're in a safe place." I wanted to believe her, but I was just waiting to feel the fingers of that disembodied hand wrap around my neck. The next few days are kind of a blur. I would wake up and find the hand at the foot of my bed. I would wake up and find it on my bedside table. I would wake up and find it gone, but then suddenly it would be right beside me. Whatever they had me on made me very groggy, and it was almost like being under a sleep paralysis demon. I could watch it until I passed back out again, the way the fingers trembled and the knuckles bunched. I could see the look in the area of the forearm that seemed like eyes, and see the desire to throttle me. Those moments made me anxious, but it felt like living in a dream. I didn't dream of waking up and finding that I had two arms. I dreamed of waking up and discovering that I wasn't being haunted by the arm that I'd left behind, one-armed or not. Then I woke up and found I wasn't alone. Someone was sitting with me, reading a book out loud, and when I started coughing, they looked up in surprise. I reached for the water pitcher, but As my stump came out, I remembered that I was down a hand. I let it fall back down, and then I went to reach with my other hand, the only hand I had, but he beat me to it. He'd been slow in getting up, but he had 2 working hands, and he soon had the cup to my lips, so I could take a long, delicious sip of tepid water. "Easy, buddy. You okay?" I told them that reading would help. People like hearing a friendly voice. I coughed again, looking around frantically as I remembered what had been stalking me. "What's up?" said the man, a youngish guy who looked about 25. "You looking for your family? I don't think anyone came to see you since you got here." "Oops, sorry, I probably shouldn't have said that. That's usually why I sit with people, though, because they need a friendly voice." I was looking around, but when I didn't see the hand, I let out a sigh of relief. "No," I said, my voice rusty. "No, it's okay." He smiled. "Well, that's good at least. You have a bad dream or something?" I lay back against the pillows, the board on the wall telling me that I'd been in and out for almost 3 weeks. Jesus, I had picked up a hell of an infection somewhere. It didn't matter, though. I was just glad to have woken up to something besides the ever-present hand. You wouldn't believe me if I... Thump, 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 thump. My jaw trembled. It couldn't be. I turned my head slowly, expecting to hear the tendons creak. And there it was. It was sitting on the radiator, drumming its fingers and glaring at me with its non-existent eyes. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream, but when the man turned my head to look at him, I felt little beyond surprise. I find it's better to just ignore them. I'm guessing it's the arm, right? Is it watching you? I nodded before I could stop myself. Yeah. How did you know? He smiled, thumping his leg with the book he'd been reading. Caught one of my own. Lost it in Iraq. I had a grenade hit me in the foot, and luckily I got about 2 steps away before it went off. Lost the foot, most of the knee, but I got to keep my eyes, and I lived. I was shocked. Wait, you can see it too? He made a weird noise and then shook his head. Not yours, but I can see mine in the corner over there. It's weird how they seem to stare without eyes, isn't it? Like, how do they manage that, I wonder? I was overjoyed. This guy could see them too. Could all people who had lost a body part see them like this? How long did it last? I remembered what he had said and wondered if it ever ended. Don't worry, he assured me, taking his seat again. You just get used to it after a while. They never go away, at least none of the guys in my support group have had theirs go away. But you get used to it. I'll get you one of their cards if you like. It's nice to have people who know what you're going through. But why is it still here? I almost begged, desperate for answers. No one really knows. They've been part of us all our lives, so I guess it makes sense for them to stay close. Vets and amputees talk about phantom limb syndrome, but I think it's more than just tingles. When that foot jumps, I feel it jump. I imagine it's the same way for you, too. They're a part of us, and they always will be, I guess. I laid back as he started reading again, letting this knowledge wash over me as the words of the Hobbit wafted over me as well. On the radiator, the hand still drummed its fingers and scowled with its lack of eyes. As I lay there ignoring it, I supposed I might as well take his advice to heart. I supposed I would always be haunted now. Haunted by this phantom limb. Tobias and I stood in the grow house, just looking at the little totem. It was terrible to look at. The screaming face, so intricately carved that there was no way a human hand had been responsible. I could see each individual tooth in its grimace, the pulsating veins in the bugged-out eyes, and read every line of anguish on its stone face. It was as if it had simply burst from the ground, fully formed in all its terrible beauty. And the longer I looked at it, the longer I believed it must be true. Terrible or not, it held power, and I could feel it no matter where I stood in the long house. You said he claimed this would help us find the lady. That's what he said, I confirmed. Do you believe him? Tobias asked, his eyes lifting from the totem with real effort. He wanted it as much as I did, but he knew what it was. This was Sauron's ring. This was a Horcrux. This was an evil thing, and it would speak poison to us if we held it. It was terrible, but it was powerful. I realized that the Warden is a demon and isn't necessarily to be trusted, but I can't imagine what he would gain by double-crossing us, especially if we've been loyal in our alliance. Tobias nodded, but didn't seem so sure. The machinations of demons are as unknown to most as the mating habits of sparrows, but I think you're correct. He doesn't stand to gain anything with a double cross, but that doesn't mean he wouldn't. Regardless, we now possess an object of great power. We would be foolish not to use it. Do you know what it is? I asked, my hand itching to touch it, but also fearing a bite. It assured me, its whispery voice likely would have driven Eve to eat the apple, that it wouldn't bite me. But I doubted it. Not exactly. The reason it could be used to find the lady is that it has a measure of her power within it. I quirked an eyebrow at him. She made this? Not exactly, he said, his eyes slipping back to it. The war that she is fighting with the Green Man is a conflict that has raged for centuries, maybe more. I met her at the end of such a war, after her forces had been killed, and she had fled with the gathered power of her fallen friends. She told me about a battle that had taken seasons to complete, and in the end, he had defeated her. She had fled in the face of his army, her own gone, but in that fleeing, she had sundered the ground with her power, and he had struck that sundering instead of her. She said, for half a moment, she believed that the faces had appeared from the rock, faces full of terrible power and awful knowledge. I think this might be one of those stones, and I think it might contain some of their power. If that's the case, then it is quite possible it could be used to find her. It could also be used to free her. It could also simply lead you back to him. Who were you planning to send with it? Harper would be a good choice. She's very quick. Micah might work as well. He tends to be focused. It has to be me, I said, saying it before I could lose my nerve. Tobias inhaled deeply. What makes you say so? Other than Randy, I'm the only one who's been a part of this world for about 50 years. Whoever takes it will need to take a bus to Arkansas. There isn't enough time to go on foot. We may have a week before spring, and they will need to locate Randy as quickly as possible. I understand things like buying bus tickets and communicating realistically with people. It should be me. Tobias sounded exasperated, but not completely opposed. Your argument is sound. The next youngest Brandylow would have last been a person in 1975. But what happens if we are attacked while you're away? Your duty is to defend the park. A task that will be even more difficult if the lady isn't returned. A task that will be impossible if the Green Man burns the park to the ground while we are undefended. Tobias shot back. In that case, one brandy low won't make a difference. If he hasn't cracked her yet, then he'll be working on her right up until the beginning of spring. At that point, he'll have to seal her away again to stop her from coming into her power. Then we might lose track of her. We'll be sunk either way, but if the lady is returned, then there's still hope. Tobias chewed at his tongue, his face even goatier than usual. He was clearly trying to find some reason to keep me here and coming up with nothing. He could dispute it all day long, but time wasn't on our side. The Green Man would have to do something soon, and it seemed likely that he would seal her away so she couldn't take up the seasonal mantle. There would be nothing to stop him from hiding her then, and they might never find her at this point. It isn't as if I can stop you, he said belligerently. No more than you could stop the others. He had opened his mouth to say something, but it was cut short as Clover came cantering into the grow house. She looked flustered, and I wondered if she'd been left at the guard shack again. Clover was good in a scrap, but she was utterly tongue-tied when it came to talking to people. She had hidden under the counter the last time someone came to see if the park was open, and they looked confused when I finally came up to see why they were lingering on the cameras. "Sam, we got trouble." Trouble's something we already have, Clover. What's this new trouble? There's a man at the guard booth. I tried to stop myself from grinding my teeth. Clover, just tell him that the park is closed temporarily. We've been through this 1,000 times. No, he doesn't want a ticket. He wants to talk to someone in the park. I lifted an eyebrow. Who is it? She shrugged. I don't know. It's the man in the big hat with the star on his chest. The sheriff? I asked, my blood running cold. There was a fresh corpse in the lily pond, and now the sheriff was standing out front. We hadn't made any noise, no more than usual. There would have been no way for someone to hear us. It was the middle of the night, after all. Why would he be coming by so late? I'll take care of this, Clover, I said, squinting as I opened the door to the grow house. It was at least 8 by the glow, maybe later. How long had Tobias and I been talking? It seemed like no time since I had drowned the young man in the pond and gone to see the warden. I checked my hands and clothes for blood and was glad to see that there was none. No sense going to greet a guest spattered in gore. Sheriff Guthrie was waiting by the gate, his hands stuffed into his pockets. Sheriff Guthrie always seemed to be the perfect match for the town of Kashmir. He was a down-to-earth country sheriff, amiable on the outside, but seemed to have his share of secrets on the inside. He had tucked his state trooper's glasses into the front of his uniform shirt, and he smiled as he approached me, his hand going out. "Hey there, Sheriff Guthrie. Good to meet you." "Sam," I said, pumping his arm twice before letting go. "We met at the tree lighting, actually." Of course, he said, his eyes still blank of recognition. "I'm just here to follow up on a report. Is the lady of the park in?" "No, she's away," I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I've been left over the daily operations." "Really? You're awful young." "I make up for it with a willingness to adapt. What can I do for you, Sheriff?" "Well, I'm here because we've received reports of illegal activity on the premises. I think it's probably hearsay, but you can't be too careful." Of course. What sort of illegal activity are we being accused of? I asked, crossing my arms. Well, someone claims you're performing illegal activities by the light of the moon, maybe doing some skulking and some illicit business practices. Some good citizen was so worried that they saw fit to call the station and make a report. Uh-huh. And what sort of practices would these be? I asked, my hand creeping down to my club as I prepared to brain him and drag him into the park before anybody could notice. Bootlegging, he said, smiling as he said it like it was a big joke. Someone claimed that some of your staff were brewing alcohol. I had to stop myself from laughing in his face. Alcohol. I had a body rotting at the bottom of a pond that was less than a mile from here, and the sheriff was going on about bootlegging. It was too funny. It was almost surreal. I can assure you, Sheriff, there's no brewing going on here. We're too busy trying to get the park ready for the spring opening. I think someone might be a little confused or something. Sheriff Guthrie looked at me critically, but when he started laughing too, I relaxed. Yeah, I had kind of thought as much. Gotta check on these things, though, you know. Have a great day. He got in his car and drove off, shaking his head as he pulled back into traffic. Clover came slowly back to the booth as I turned, glancing around like she expected Guthrie to jump out at her or something. He's gone? He is gone, I assured her. Thank goodness, she said. Yeah, he was looking for bootleggers, I said, shaking my head and laughing. What are bootleggers? Clover asked. People who make alcohol, as if anyone would be... Oh, you mean like Tina and Maria? My words died in my mouth. What? Yeah, Tina and Maria are making liquor in the old barn. It's really good. They use the apples we collected from last autumn to... Show me, I said, and she smiled as she skipped off towards the barn that we had used for our autumn display. I sighed, seeing my plans to leave tonight fly out like dandelion fluff. This was going to be a long day. They aren't going to be in trouble, are they? We were heading across the scraggy-looking croplands, the barn coming into view as we dodged rocks and potholes that seemed to have found their way into the field. Oh, definitely, I told her. But why? Clover said. We made alcohol during the festival and that was okay. Why is this different? Well, I said, stumbling in a gopher hole before righting myself. For starters, that was apple cider, and it wasn't alcoholic. For two, it's illegal to sell alcohol without a license, and we don't have one. The park could be in a lot of trouble if they caught us selling alcohol, and then the park would close. You don't want that, right? No! Clover almost wailed. I love it here. Then we need to stop them before they do something foolish that could jeopardize the garden. The barn looked more like the Fisher-Price one that I had played with as a kid than a real barn. It was a perfect fire engine red, the paint still looking wet, though it had dried months ago. I sometimes wondered what exactly they had painted it with, but I shook it off. I didn't have time to wonder today. I could hear low talk coming from inside, and I rolled my eyes at how open they were being about this. Had they really set up a still in the barn? That would be the first place the sheriff would look. I grabbed the handle of the barn door, preparing to throw it open and scare them, but as the door creaked open, I was surprised to see not Tina and Maria, but a different pair of brandy-low. August and Hemlock were two of our best growers. They worked regularly with Tobias to grow things for the ladies' projects, and they'd been helping him to get some things in order so we could make money while she was away. They'd been growing something in the barn, it appeared. and I was suddenly very glad that the sheriff hadn't insisted on snooping around. Making alcohol was one thing. The region was known for moonshine stills and late-night bootleg runs. But what was growing in those planter boxes would have gone far past old Sheriff Guthrie and into the pocket of some DEA agent with a quota to fill. "What in the hell are you doing?" I shouted, trying and failing to keep the rage out of my voice. They both turned around, completely unashamed of what they were standing amongst, and seemed pleasantly surprised to see me. "Ah, Sam, good you're here. We were just about done with our first harvest, and I was getting ready to come and talk to you about distribution." Distribution? August said it as if he were planning on opening a lemonade stand out in the parking lot. What they were standing amongst was about 25 pounds of 10 to 20 years in prison for manufacture and distribution. I suppose it wasn't the worst thing I could have found them growing in the cowshed. After all, it was pretty common knowledge that most of the trailers around here were supporting entrepreneurs of a different sort. Even so, Sheriff Guthrie would have shit a bird if he'd come in and just found them here like this. Distribution! Do you even realize what you're sitting on here would get you locked in Stragview for a very long time? Two of them looked at the plants in confusion. Why would they lock us in prison? Because we were growing some plants? I put my face in my hands. These plants are illegal to grow. They're a felony offense. Never mind selling them. You could go to prison for just having them in this state. August and Hemlock looked at each other as if that was the craziest thing they had ever heard. "I don't understand," August said. If I bit my tongue any harder, it was going to come off. The government has decided that these plants are dangerous. You can't grow them, you can't even own them, and you certainly can't sell them. It's the law. Tobias is growing mushrooms in the grow house that would melt somebody's stomach. Tina and Maria are brewing alcohol that dulls the nerves and the senses, but they'd put us in the stocks for growing a plant that does little more than alleviate anxiety? I had to remind myself that the last time August had been a human, the Black Plague had been a problem, and tried again to be patient. Yes, August, the rules have changed since you owned an apothecary. Well, August said, scratching his neck, I suppose we could just grow something different. Coca plants aren't too hard to grow, I suppose. Next you'll tell me that heroin is illegal, though. I sighed. This was proving to be a long day, and it was just starting. Yes, August, you can't sell cocaine or heroin either. But the government regulates those, don't they? They used to. It's complicated. Look, you can't sell drugs. Maybe, I don't know, produce chocolate or coffee or something they don't put you in jail for. Please, I added, trying not to melt down on the pair. Why are you growing this stuff anyway? August shrugged. To make money for the garden, of course. That fizzled some of my anger. They'd been trying to help, and I was sitting here yelling at them like an asshole. Suddenly didn't feel so righteous. But they needed to understand that some of this could get them in a lot of trouble if they went around trying to sell it. Maybe I was a little harsh. It's nice that you want to make money for the park, but be careful how you go about it. Please. They both assured me they would. Hemlock was already talking about working on some supercharged coffee beans, and I pressed on as I tried to find the pair that I was looking for. You mentioned Tina and Maria. Where can I find them? They were actually who I was looking for. They were supposed to be in here. They were. Hemlock said, "but they decided it wasn't good for ventilation to be inside the shed. They told us that we could use it for growing our plants, and they moved their operation somewhere else." "Great, fantastic. Do you happen to know where that is?" They looked at each other, seeming to share thoughts, and shook their heads. "They just said we could use the barn. They never told us where they were going." "Fine. These have to go. Right now." "But," Hemlock said, and I cut her off. "Now," I said, some of my temper creeping back in. "Burn them, bury them, whatever, I don't care. But they have to go. Understand?" They nodded unhappily, and I went out into the park with Clover on my heels. "One thing after another today," I said under my breath. "You sound tired, Sam. Are you tired today?" Clover asked. "Not really. I'm just frustrated. I need to be..." But my teeth came together with a clack. I didn't know if I wanted to tell Clover I was leaving. The Brandylow had come to look to me for guidance, as they had looked to the lady or Randy. If they knew I was leaving, they might leave as well. Tobias barely had enough hands to keep the local kids out at night. If a bunch of them left when I left, it would only get worse. "Need to be what?" Clover asked, trying to keep up with me as I quickened my pace. "Nothing. Don't worry about it. Let's head back to the security station and see if we can't find them on the cameras." Clover and I headed to the booth, and I was hopeful that we could find them moving around with bottles or something incriminating. We had cameras everywhere, if you recall, from my first encounter with the lady and her ilk, and it seemed likely that we could catch a glimpse of them if we looked long enough. We were coming to the front gate when I caught sight of him, and I could already feel the tension. His hood was up, his sneakers looked like they had pounded a lot of pavement in their day, and he was dressed as nondescript as you could manage. He looked as if he were trying his best to find an outfit that would throw a police description, and I suddenly wished that I'd let Hemlock finish what she was about to say. Maybe they had discovered someone to distribute to already. Good thing Guthrie was gone, or this wouldn't have done my story any favors. "Can I help you?" I asked, the man looking up from his phone as he tensed. "You August?" he asked, looking around as if smelling a trap. No, I am not. Why are you looking for him?" "He says he's got something for me, something important." "Uh-huh. Sorry, buddy, but August isn't selling anything today. Might be time to head out." The kid stood a little taller, trying to be intimidating, but barely making it threatening. "I don't think so. I need to talk to August. Get him out here before I..." He shrank a little as I pulled my cudgel from my belt and let a little bit of my glamour slip. "Before you what? Before you get yourself beat up and I call the sheriff? Get out of here, kid. I won't ask again." The kid's bravado seemed to deflate right along with his posturing. I wondered what he saw when he looked past my barrier. Was it a satyr or something? A goat monster from some comic book? Whatever it was, it filled him with something less than confidence. Whoa, no trouble here, sir. I'll head on. I must have the wrong address." He headed out across the parking lot, and as he disappeared down the sidewalk, I saw the mailbox and wondered if there might be a letter from Randy. "Go check the cameras, Clover. I'll be there in a second." Clover didn't argue. She rarely argued, and I strode across the parking lot as I made my way to the mailbox. I looked down, expecting to see a rut worn in the concrete. I'd made this pilgrimage so many times that it seemed that there should be a steady path between the sidewalk and the letterbox, and as I got close, I felt sure that there would be a letter in there from Randy. It had been a couple of days, but he almost always sent a letter about every third or fifth day. Randy had been pretty punctual with his writing, and I guess I'd become used to reading his words and figuring out where he was. There was a Smart Shopper circular and a flyer for a new barbecue place. Between them was, just as I had suspected, a letter from Randy. I opened it with a fingernail and read it on the way back to the guard shack. Dear Sam, we're stuck in this little dirt-splat town called Armitage. The we has taken on much more volume these days, too. I have about 20 Brandylow with me now, as well as the Barker and the Gordlin. We are a merry band these days, but it's harder to move without being noticed. The rains are torrential here. We should be stuck for a couple of days, at least until the rains slacken off. There's talk of floods, but the old-timers think it won't come to that. Say a prayer for us. We should be returning soon. Randy. I sighed as I came into the security hut and nearly ran slap into Clover. I found them, she said, sounding excited. They're in the grove near the 4 o'clock spot. That's not too far. Come on, let's go talk to them. We set out towards the 4th display area. It was empty at that time. They all were. But I could smell a sharp smell coming from a nearby collective of trees behind it. I could hear them chattering, comparing chemical range and heat displacement. And when I burst into the clearing, they at least had the decency to look surprised. Shut it down, I told them. Shut it down and get rid of whatever you've made. Get rid of it? Maria said. But we already have buyers for it. Yeah, and the sheriff on your ass. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you have to stop. It's only going to lead to more problems. Maria and Tina looked at each other, but they had become pretty used to following orders if they came from someone with a sash. Don't sweat it too much, I told them, as Clover peeked from behind the branches of a smaller tree. I don't think money will be a problem for much longer. I think the lady should be back with us very soon. That brought a smile to all three of them, and I left them to their breaking and dismantling. Far from being discouraged by the appearance of so much contraband, I was more certain than ever that I needed to get this totem to Randy and help him find the lady. Spring would never return to the park otherwise, and we desperately needed the lady's presence. Not just so the park wouldn't close, not just because we needed a place to stay. We needed her because the alternative was too terrible to consider. Without her, we would truly be lost for good. Though resourceful, it seemed her children were in sad need of guidance. The lady must return, or we would remain in winter forever. I need a ticket to Far Creek, Arkansas. The lady at the bus station squinted at me. Far Creek? I'm not familiar with that one. It's in the middle of the state, I believe. The website for the Greyhound line says it's small, but it's still open. The lady did some clicking, the guy behind me sighing a little too dramatically as she looked for the right spot. Kashmir has a Greyhound station, though I'm not sure why. I don't remember having ever seen a bus roll out of it, but I suppose they must if the place is open. Other than me, there were only a couple of people in the terminal, and they both had that out-of-town look about them. It's hard to explain, but it's usually pretty easy to tell when an outsider comes in somehow. Randy told me that it's rare to see someone new here, and the more I think about it, the more I realize how right he is. Ah, there it is. Yeah, it appears to be open. It's a 9-hour trip with 4 stops, and a ticket will run you $85.60. I handed her a $100 bill, and she handed me change. It had been one of the last hundreds that we had in the cash box, and Tobias had been loath to hand it over. I'd had to argue pretty hard to get him to hand it over, but eventually the need had won out. It should arrive in about 25 minutes. It's a layover, so you should have lots of company. I took a seat on one of the hard plastic chairs by the window, so I could watch the terminal. The impatient guy in the cargo shorts and the Hawaiian shirt moved into the place I had evacuated and began complaining about how the bus had put him off here when he was trying to get to Houston. I heard him shouting that this wasn't even the right state, and he wasn't sure why the bus had put him off here, and the woman offered to get him on the same bus I was supposed to board. "Sacrifice," said a hollow voice, but I pushed it down. The thing had been chatty since I'd slipped it into my breast pocket, and I didn't like it. "You should be able to get off in Louisiana and catch a connecting bus to Houston, sir. Hand the bus driver this ticket when he gets here, and he should let you board the bus." The man grumbled his way to the chair near mine, and I popped in a headphone and listened to some music as I waited. Tobias had tried to talk me out of it again, but I wouldn't be dissuaded. "I have to go, Tobias. Someone has to find Randy and get this to him, and if he's stuck there a couple of days, then this is my chance." "Okay, for starters, we don't even know how old that letter is. Randy could have sent that a week ago. He could have sent it yesterday. We don't know if he's still there or not." I was prepared for that. Look at the post date. The letter was sent 2 days ago. Some mailman clearly needs a raise because he didn't waste any time getting this to us. If Randy is stuck in that town because of torrential rains that I know are still going on because I checked the news, then if I can get there within a day, I can pick up his tracks and get him this totem. And what are we going to do in the meantime? You told me that you broke up 2 different plans by our own people that could have easily caused trouble for the garden. Plans that, I might add, I would have seen no problem with. In my time, I regularly sold alcohol that I had made in my own still, as well as plants I had grown. You and Randy are newer than we are. You know the world better than we do. We need you here to help us navigate the pitfalls. I tried to keep the frustration out of my voice, but we were wasting time. Just stop them from doing anything stupid for the next day or 2. I should be back by the end of the week, Monday morning at the latest. As long as they don't burn the park down, or, I don't know, try to create some kind of virus or something, then we should be fine. I talked to August and Hemlock and made them agree that they wouldn't grow anything on a long list of plants that I had handed them. I suggested that they grow coffee beans for a new kind of coffee instead, and suggested maybe some tea as well so that the park could have its own line to sell. Speaking with Tina and Maria, I suggested that maybe they could make kombucha or maybe root beer or something if they were looking to sell homemade products. Both groups looked at me as if I were splitting hairs, but they agreed to begin their operation and see how it went. That would keep them out of trouble for at least a couple of days, and a couple of days was really all I needed. If the projects actually go anywhere, then we should be able to begin production on a line of beverages for the park, something that we could sell legally. I just need you to keep an eye on the place for a week, tops. I'll be back by then. Tobias looked dubious. Will you, Sam? Because I'm not so sure. What? Do you think I'm just going to abandon the park? I've been loyal, Tobias. I've done my part. I think I've earned a little trust. It's not that at all, Tobias said, and he sounded a little hurt. I don't doubt your loyalty in the least bit. What I doubt is your ability to just hand that ugly rock over to Randy and then scamper back here as we agreed upon. Are you going to tell me that once you're that close to finding the lady, you'll be capable of returning without a backwards glance? I wanted to deny his claims, but he was right. I'm not chastising you for wanting that, Tobias added. If I were that close to her and knew that she was near, I don't think I could come back either. I don't fault you for it. But if Randy and the other Brandylow go and get themselves killed, then who's going to be here to start the next expedition? Or the one after that? I'm no adventurer, Sam. I'm not a warrior. I'm just an alchemist who's out of his depth. If you go and get yourself killed, then there'll be no one to go looking for her. Then we really will be lost. I couldn't argue that with him. Tobias was right. If I left, then it would be a scattering of silly hearts and dreamers. There wasn't a real warrior amongst the brandylow we had left. Hell, I wasn't a real warrior. I was just a night security guard who was completely out of his element and trying his best to keep his head above water until this was done. Trust me, Tobias, I'll get this thing to Randy, and if I can help him, I will, but if there is breath still in my body, I will return to this place, with or without her. I'll come back. Tobias looked unsure for a moment, but finally extended a hand. Do you swear? I gave you my word, Tobias. What else do you want? No. I mean, do you swear? Do you make a sacred oath upon the lady that you will come back? I looked down at his hand, not quite sure that I wanted to shake it, but after some contemplation, I took it, and it felt like static electricity moved between our fingers. This felt a little different. This felt like more than a promise. I could almost feel an extension of Tobias's power as it moved from him to me, and I realized that breaking this would be a really bad idea. I swear, I said, and that feeling of electricity between my fingers came again. He had given me the last $100 they had in the cash box, saying that it was just the biggest bill they had. Then he sent me on my way. I wasn't sure I believed they had more cash in that cash box, but I wasn't going to argue with him. We had gone 4 months without any kind of activity in the park, and our cash reserves were getting very low. I knew that if she didn't come back in time for spring, the lady might not have a park to come back to, and it formed my resolve into something stronger. Sir? I looked up, the attendant's voice barely audible over the sound of Five-Finger Death Punch. Your bus is here. I looked out the window, and sure enough, it had snuck up on me while I was lost in thought. The guy who was going to Texas was nowhere to be seen. He must have decided to take in the sights, which wasn't too out of the ordinary. Cashmere had a way of grabbing people, whether they wanted to be or not, and I was sure that he would make a fine addition to the town. I handed her my ticket and headed for the terminal, passing a few people as they got off the bus and looked around in confusion. Another snack for Cashmere, I suppose. The bus wasn't full, but it was crowded. I took a seat near the back and got comfy. It was going to be a long ride, and I wanted to save my strength for when I got there. GPS instructions had told me that I had another hour's drive after I got to Farcreef, and I hoped that I could catch a cab or something. They probably wouldn't rent me a car for less than $20, if there was even a place to rent one, so I was either walking or hitching. As the last of the passengers got on the bus pulled out after announcing it was on its way to South Carolina and Arkansas. I got comfortable, glad there was no one sitting next to me to nudge me the whole trip, and played a little on my phone. I had a portable battery in my backpack, a holdover from my past life, but it was only likely to last a few hours. I don't know when. It was after our second bathroom trip and after my 70th game of Tetris, but I did something I hadn't done in a while. I sat there, stacking blocks and staring at the trees as they went past, and fell asleep. I opened my eyes in a dark cave. The dripping of stalagmites was a constant background reminder that I wasn't on the bus anymore. As I tried to make sense of it, I heard a new sound join the plink of water. The rattle of chains in this place sounded like the clatter of old bones in this hollow crypt, and as I looked for the source, I saw her. She was chained to one of the stalagmites, her body bowed with the effort of staying upright. She did not appear to be injured, but she did appear exhausted. She had very little left, and as spring approached, she knew that she wouldn't see the return of her power. She would be sealed away again, simple as that, and the next time she saw the sun, it would be a different time and place. "Help me," she begged, looking right at me. "Help me. Don't let them put me in the dark again." I woke up with a start as the bus came to a stop. I'd been asleep for 6 hours. At least, that's what my phone said. I'd plugged it into the portable battery, but the battery was nearly dead now. The phone would last for a while, but Randy didn't have a phone that I could use to call him. Randy had abandoned most of the human trappings when he'd become a brandylow, but the phone was such a huge part of me that I couldn't bear to get rid of it. How would I update you guys if I did, after all? The bus was taking on new passengers, and as I thought about getting off to stretch my legs, I heard something terrible. Someone was whistling, but it wasn't a normal sort of whistling. The tone was too loud. The sound was discordant, and I realized too late that I'd heard it before. It was the sound that had hit us on New Year's, the sound that had interrupted our concentration, had interrupted our connection to the lady. The nightmares had been bad, but the disconnect had been worse. He came onto the bus, an old tramp in a long coat and a hood, and his whistling filled it and caused a ripple to run through the patrons. Mothers looked at their children's noisy electronics with a little less patience. Friends stopped joking and became sullen, and even the bus driver seemed grumpier as he closed the door and got us underway. The man looked around, pretending to contemplate, before his eyes settled on me, and he came to join me, taking the seat beside me. We sat there without speaking for a moment, his whistling starting to grate on me, and when I finally asked him to stop and say what he had to say, I was surprised when he obliged. "What do you want?" I asked him, the bus rumbling beneath me, and some of the tension eased. "Welcome, emissary. Welcome to the Green Man's land." He spoke it with just the slightest hint of sarcasm, like a tour guide giving a lecture of a place that he has long ago stopped believing in. "Is that what you came for? To welcome me?" "Yes, and no," he said. His eyes were pointed towards the front, but I could see his smile. This one was a hyena. He liked to nip and bite at his prey before finishing them off, and he probably started with the soft parts. I had to remind myself that this was one of the Green Man's 3 generals, maybe even the worst of them. "Speak sense or go away. I've got a long trip ahead of me, and I don't wish to make it with you." The Raggedy Man snorted, "As if such decisions are yours alone to make. Is it not the friends we make along the way, after all, that are so important?" "We are not friends," I told him, keeping my own eyes pointed front. I didn't want to study him. I did not want to see what lay below that hood of darkness. Down there lay madness, and I was crazy enough as it was. "Oh, but we could be. The Green Man could be your friend. Brandylow have been his friends before, and they could be again. The Green Man makes so many friends, and all he asks is a little show of that friendship. He asks only for a boon, and then he'll take you into his service and thank you for your effort. Let me guess, he wants my undying love and companionship," I joked, already knowing the answer. When the whistler touched the totem that sat in my breast pocket, I shuddered like he'd slapped me with a cold wind. No, he has no need for love or companions. What he wants is his power back. What he wants is this. I sat speechless, the bus rumbling along as we made our way to Farcreef. The whistler was an uncomfortable presence beside me, humming a little under his breath as he waited for my answer. He was in no hurry. He had all the time in the world, and he knew that I wasn't getting off the bus for Another 2 hours anyway. Afraid I can't give it to you, sport. You or your green man. There's a much worse fellow than either you or your boss waiting for me to bring it back. And he's way scarier than you. But he's not here, is he? The Whistler said. It's just you and I. So why don't you give me that little rock and go back home? We wouldn't want you to get hurt. I sucked in a breath. I couldn't fight him here. People would get hurt, and it would draw a lot of attention to me. If I was locked in a local jail and the totem was in evidence, then it would be even easier to steal, and I'd be hemmed up through the machinations of some bumpkin court system. I could run. That was an option. I could go through one of these windows pretty easily and flee, but that could leave me hurt if I accidentally landed in the path of an oncoming car. I'd be easy pickings then, a sitting duck with nowhere to go. He could just take the totem from me and be on his way. He seemed to have been reading my mind, because his next statement chilled me. I suppose you could run. Maybe you'd even escape, which I must say would be a great idea. I won't pursue you, not right away. I'd stay right here on this bus and keep whistling my little tune. After a couple of miles, the people on the bus would get pretty cranky. After an hour, they'd probably be ready to kill each other. When the bus rolls into Farcreef in about an hour and a half, it'd be a charnel house. Mothers killing children. Friends ripping out each other's throats. Fathers and sons throttling one another. And all because you left me alone with them. What are these people to me? I asked, knowing he knew the truth. I didn't know any of these people, but I couldn't just leave them at his mercy either. They were blameless in all this. Just pawns in a game they were unaware of. And if I got them killed, it would stick with me. I still felt bad about the fellow I'd killed in the lily pond. And I knew the passengers on the bus would follow me if I let him have them. Then by all means, there's the window, the Whistler said. We sat there in silence for a moment, the bus jostling me a little as it hit a pothole. The people on the bus had gone back to some approximation of normal, but the tension was still present. It was like a low charge running through a wire, the kind that can hum with just a little goosing. He could do it, I didn't have a doubt. But what was the alternative? Use me. The voice was low and subtle, the same voice I'd been hearing right along since picking it up. I thought at it, asking what it wanted, and it told me again to use it. Hand me to him. Seriously? I thought at it, trying not to let my mouth move when I did it. That's what he wants me to do. The totem showed me what it wanted, and I saw how it could be. I see no way out of this without people getting hurt. I suppose I'll have to give it to you so we can avoid bloodshed. I saw the greedy way he looked at it as it came out of my breast pocket. His hand shook a little as it came up to take it, and I was sure that mine wasn't particularly steady. The rock told me to face its mouth towards him, and it would do the rest. The Whistler licked his lips as his fingers drew close, but as they came within grabbing distance, the totem struck. The screaming mouth bit him suddenly, the granite parting with an oddly stretching sound. It was like listening to a small landslide or a tiny earthquake. The whistler cried out as the stone teeth sunk into his skin. He tried to pull back, but the little stone totem had its chompers in him, and despite all his strength, he was unable to pull away. "What is this?" the whistler hissed at me. "What are you—" But he suddenly stopped. The totem's eyes rolled up to look at the thing, its teeth still in his blackened finger. His hands looked like they had been exposed to frostbite, and as some of the black flesh threatened to come loose, the totem bit down harder. The whistler flinched, but the sound that escaped him was nearly erotic. It was forced from him in a hazy push as it left his lips. The whistler began to shake. The creature bit deeper into the finger. The whistler began to vibrate like someone in a massage chair. And as I watched, something strange happened. The man seemed to fall into himself. His arms became wind, his clothes the ragged remains of a scarecrow's attire, and as his chest caved in and his shoulders slumped, I heard him husk out a final word on the matter. His face became sand or the dust from beneath the bed, and his final words were nearly lost amongst the rustle of his clothes. "I was too eager." His clothes fell onto the seat beside me, and if anyone noticed, they did not comment. I looked at the totem, asking silently what the hell that had been. If it knew, it never said. "What do you mean there's no cabs to Armitage?" The lady behind the desk looked at me through the smoke of her cigarette, and I wondered if I had somehow traveled in time as I sat on the bus. The whole terminal looked like it might have been new in the 70s, and incidentally, that was probably the last time it had been clean. It was dingy, the people in the lobby sitting huddled in uncomfortable plastic chairs, and I was pretty glad that I wouldn't be waiting here for long. The cobwebs in the corners looked old enough to vote, and I wondered how nicotine-dependent those spiders were. "As I said, sir, the town is too small for an active cab company. If you want to get to Armitage, you'll either have to set up something or find someone heading that direction." "Ma'am, I just came here on the bus. I don't know anyone." "Well, I don't know what to tell you, sir. I suppose you'd had better prey on the kindness of strangers." "Next!" she yelled, and I stalked off as I headed for the door. I had to get to Armitage, and I had to get there promptly. The sun was already starting to go down, and the rain here in Farcreef was starting to slack off. They would move on before too much longer, and I would have an even harder time tracking them. I needed to make contact with them, and the thought of walking an hour up the road was not appealing. "Excuse me, son," said a voice behind me, and I turned to find an older man in overalls and no shoes. "I couldn't help but overhear that you were looking to get to Armitage. I'm heading back that way myself. Would you care for a ride?" Wow, Providence was quick with the answer to unspoken prayers today. "That would be fantastic, sir. Thank you so much." He smiled, showing me a few sociably yellow teeth amongst the gaps. "It's my pleasure. God says we should help travelers on the road in need, and I, for one, like to live by the old maxim of doing what Jesus would do." He led me to the parking lot and introduced me to Dorothy, his beat-up old truck. Dorothy was no sleek new model. Dorothy was 4 tons of Detroit rolling steel. The inside had that comfortable smell of old tobacco and the ghosts of meals long gone. It was clean, the seats cracked old pleather that had seen decades, I would wager. They sat all right, despite the cracks, and the man brought the truck to life as we made our way out of the muddy parking lot. "The name's Emery," the old man said, taking his hand off the wheel long enough to shake mine. "Sam," I said, pumping his hand 3 times. "What brings you to the Greyhound station today?" Can't see anyone coming here for the atmosphere. Emery laughed. I suppose it does seem a little odd. I was buying tickets for the big gray dog. My wife and I are going to Florida next month, so she can stay with her family. I had been nodding, but when he said the last, I realized it might be rude to ask. Sorry to hear about that. Are you staying with them too? He chuckled again, but it was rueful. No, not for many years yet, I hope. My wife, she died last month, peacefully in her sleep, thank God, and I'm taking her back to lay in the family plot with her parents and her sisters. She made me promise I would after her first heart attack, and I mean to keep my promise. I felt even worse now that I'd made him lay it out like that. I'm sorry if it's hard to talk about. I didn't mean to pry. It's not your fault. You were making conversation. What about you? What brings you out here to the elbow of nowhere? I'm just looking for some friends. There's a few of them waiting out the rain in Armitage, and I mean to link up with them. His face brightened again. You don't mean Randy and his little band of hikers, do you? That caught me off guard. Yeah, actually. How do you know Randy? Emery laughed as he took a wet curve much too fast. He was staying in the barn when I left. He's been there for about 4 days now. I think he intends to move on tomorrow, but I'm afraid you might have missed him. He said he'd be there when I got back, but he had a going look in his eye, and I felt sure that he was just saying so. I assume he'll have headed out with his group by the time we get there, but maybe you can backtrail him. I nodded, patting the totem in my breast pocket. I knew I could backtrail him. The Gordling would be heading for the lady, and the totem was going in the same direction. I was certain I could find them, rain or no rain, and Emery must have seen it on my face. Pretty good tracker, I guess. Well, hopefully it won't come to that. I've had them in my barn for a while, and the rain is still pretty hard. I hope they decided to stay one more night and leave in the morning. Are they kin to you? Y'all have a similar look. I had to stop myself from laughing. I guess we did all have the same look, didn't we? I didn't believe this old guy could see through our glamour, but I did believe that he could see more than most could. Maybe it came from being older, or maybe it came from living on the fringes for so long, but whatever it was, he had seen more of me than the passengers on the bus had. Most of them hadn't seemed to see the clothes that had been sitting on the seat beside me either. They had gotten off the bus and left, taking their connecting buses or catching rides or whatever else they meant to do. I'd left the clothes there, scooting around them so they wouldn't touch me, and got off the bus with the others. I wondered if anyone would clean them up or if they would just sit there forever, unseen and unnoticed. I guessed it didn't matter, but it was strange what you thought about sometimes. Any idea where they were heading? Emery asked, as a sign slid by proclaiming Armitage was about 30 miles away. Heading? I asked, still a little lost in thought. Well, they have about 30 people with them now, a real troop of hippies by the look of it, and none of them seem to want to say where it is they're going. I imagined they weren't in any sort of hurry. Up to the mountains. We're heading up there for a little spring camping. Emery smiled. Good time of the year for it. Now that the rain is over, the conditions in the Ozarks should be great for camping. Are you guys meeting with anyone? Maybe having a big party up there or something? I looked out the window as we rolled through a collection of trees. Can't really say. Who knows who we might find along the way, I guess. Emery did laugh then. So tight-lipped about it. You'd think you were all going to war up there or something. That's okay, though. I understand. People need their secrets sometimes. We rolled along in silence for a little bit, the old truck creaking and groaning, And when we made it to Armitage, I felt my heart leap a little bit. I was here. I was so close. I could still catch them if I hurried. With any luck, I hadn't missed them, and I could find them in this barn owned by this timely fellow in the old truck. They would still be huddled in the hay of his loft, some of them napping or dozing, and Randy would smile and wave at me in the doorway of the man's no-color barn. Armitage wasn't much of a town when you drove through it. A hardware store, a couple of gas stations, a grocery store of a chain I wasn't familiar with, a Dollar General, of course, and a park with an old-fashioned bandstand in it. It was all very cozy, very small-town America. Emery turned at the four-way stop, utilizing the town's only red light, and headed past a feed store and into a little suburb. Suburb might be too grand a term for it. There were a rude collection of trailer homes, each sitting on their own half-acre, as they stood cheek and jowl with each other. We drove to the end of one of the roads, and that's when I saw the two-story farmhouse. It looked like one of those houses in a 90s sitcom, the kind that held too many kids or some kind of secret. The barn behind it peeked over the side of the house, but it was the mountain behind it that really caught my eye. It soared into the clouds, rising like a titan, and I could feel it in my bones that this was where she was. This was the place he had hidden her. I had made it. I could find her. I could find Randy, and we could all go back to the garden, and everything could go back to normal. The idea that all of them might not come back from the mountain had never crossed my mind. Would never cross my mind, and I felt sure that we would win the day. The barn, however, was empty. "Figured they would have headed on," Emery said with a chuckle. "You think you can find them?" He looked confused when I held out the $10 bill for him to take. For your gas," I said, in the face of his confusion. Emery looked at it and then shook his head slowly. "Nah, I don't need it. Kindness is all the reward we need in life. Go on, young man, find your friends. If you come through this way again, stop and say hi." I smiled, touched by the gesture, and promised that I would. I looked in the mud for the fresh hoof prints and found them. I briefly wondered what Emery would make of them if he saw them, but I didn't wonder long. I was off now, following the pull from the stone in my pocket. The path was easy to find. The Brandylow and their companions had left enough tracks for a blind man to follow, and soon I could see the mountain rising high enough to make my neck hurt when I tried to look at the top. The totem nearly yanked itself through my shirt, the breathy voice champing at the bit to be on its journey again. It was nearing dark when I saw their fires coming into view. I came stumbling in and startled a pair of haphazard guards who were standing a lazy sort of sentry duty. "Who goes there?" one of them asked, brandishing a club. But something hit me in the ankles, and I looked down to see the gourdling as it battered my shins like a house cat who's just spied its master. "Good to see you too, little friend," I said, stooping to scratch its stock. "Sam?" Randy asked, and I stood as he wrapped me in a hug. "What are you doing here?" "I came to find you," I said, reaching into my pocket and digging out the totem. "The warden gave me this, and he said that it could help us find the lady." Randy raised an eyebrow. "He might have given it to you before I left. Does it work?" As it sat in my hand, I could already feel it pulling me towards the mountain. "Oh, yeah, it works well." "Well, then," Randy said, turning to the others, "form up troops. We're going to go get the lady tonight." They raised a cheer, and I imagined that you could hear it at Emery's house. We headed into the mountains by night, and my fellow Brandylow and I needed no moon to guide us. The totem was leading us unerringly towards the towering mountain not far from the farmhouse. and even from here, it looked cold and foreboding. Most of the brandylow here were faces I knew from the park, but some of them were new to me. Randy hadn't been kidding when he said that he'd picked up quite a merry band. There were about 30 in all, and they were dressed in an odd assortment of cast-off clothes. Some of them were things that were clearly stolen from clotheslines or donation boxes, but some of them were the long-traveled garments of professional vagabonds. I could see raincoats and parkas and long coats and all other sorts of all-weather gear. There were just as many backpacks and rucksacks and traveling bundles, too. Some of them had armor, poor stuff made from sheet metal or rubber tires, but a few of them had body armor that looked salvaged from dumps or landfills. Their weapons were mostly wooden, clubs and tree limbs, but a few of them had machetes and knives. One of them, dressed in military digital camos, had an assault rifle around his back on a strap, though who knew if he had any ammunition for it. They all deferred to Randy, but it appeared that he had picked up a few undergenerals as well. "Cannon over there," he said, as he pointed out the tall brandylow with the faded flak jacket, was a private security guy for nearly a decade. Marta, he pointed to another one in homemade leather armor, she fought in the Crusades. At least that's what she says. She's fierce enough, I know that. Devon, he pointed to a lean fellow in something I can only describe as a tire vest. He was in the Blitz during World War II. The lady has more brandylow than we ever knew of. Some of them don't even know she's back yet. It seemed that we had found some real warriors to help us, and not a moment too soon either. The Barker was still with him too, keeping pace in his old black suit that seemed immune to mud and stains. The Gordling was there as well, yarking and running at the head of the group, and I was glad the two of them had made it. The Barker had been our enemy once, but it appeared that he might now be with us. He had been very interested in the totem, but I had kept it away from him when he tried to touch it. The totem was interested in him, too, and until he proved untrustworthy, I didn't want to sacrifice him to the hungry rock. He had smiled sadly when I pulled it back. "Old prejudices die hard, I see." "It's nothing like that," I assured him. "It's just that, well, it's already eaten one of the Green Man's allies, and you seem to be less on his side these days." That led to a story about the Whistler and how he had come looking for me on the bus. Randy seemed almost giddy when he heard that he was gone. "Whew, that's one less we have to go through then. If the corn man left after the scrap at the garden, then we could be in for another fight like the War of Winter." The Barker, however, shook his head. "The Whistler isn't really a person, more of an identity. The Green Man will find someone else to give the power to. He has before, he will again." "Not tonight, though. Tonight, he has to answer to us," Randy said. That was how we had come to be heading for the mountain, where she'd been held captive. "She's in one of the cave systems deep in the Juniper Mountains. If we can get in and get her out quickly, we might be able to avoid a fracas." We came to the base of the mountain and found that this probably wasn't going to happen bloodlessly. The base of the mountain was blocked by a thick field of corn. That probably doesn't sound terribly scary, but we had run into corn creatures before, and the presence of a field of golden corn was a pretty good indicator they were planning an ambush. The Gordling began to growl in his little orange throat, but I noticed he didn't seem to be in a hurry to leave Randy's side either. "What you think?" Randy said, all of us stopping at the edge. "Well, at least we know we're heading in the right direction." "Funny. What do you think we should do about this?" "I've got an idea," Cannon said, reaching for a canister on his belt and holding it up for Randy to see. Randy's eyes got very large. "Is that a grenade?" Cannon smirked. "It's an incendiary explosive. I don't know if it'll take. It's pretty wet. But It might help us get through." "Couldn't hurt," Randy said. "I won't ask where you got a grenade from, but suppose I'm glad you have it." Cannon drew back and threw the thing into the corn. It went up with a loud chuffing sound, and as the corn took flame, there was a loud roaring sound from the depths of the field. It was mad. We had roused a monster from the depths, but as the fire died in the wet of the maize, the corn remained. "Well, guess we're going in," Randy said, drawing his club. Marta snorted. "You want to go in there? You know that's where they're waiting for us." "It's a suicide run," Cannon said. "It's the only way to the cave opening," Randy said, pointing to the yawning mouth beyond the cornfield. "What choice have we got?" They nodded, and we headed carefully into the cornfield. The corn parted in that whispery way that it has as we came into the depths of the living maze. We stayed close, weapons at the ready, as we prepared for the coming ambush. It reminded me of a scene from one of the Jurassic Park movies that I'd watched a lot as a kid. The group in the movie was cutting through the tall grass, weapons in hand, heads on a swivel, and as they went, the camera angle showed the raptors making a trail through the grass. I prayed the same wasn't happening to us, but it was hard to ignore the noises. The Gordling, riding on Randy's shoulder, was growling again, and as he turned from right to left, it was hard not to imagine Randy with two heads. Something was coming from the corn, something big and angry. I could see them rustle by as they made their way through. They were too quick to catch a good look at, but they were familiar. These were the things that we had seen at the battle in the parking lot, and as we made our way through the corn, they stalked us relentlessly. "We should have been out of here by now," Randy whispered, more to himself than anyone. "This cornfield can't be that big." It started as a cry from the back of the group. The word came up the line that something had snatched Farmoon and pulled him into the corn. As we tried to figure out what to do, someone got snatched from the front of the line too, and it seemed that Randy had had enough. "Cut it down," Randy yelled, his own club coming out, and the Brandylow began swiveling their weapons as they attempted to make holes in the corn. I saw now that some of those clubs had axe heads and spikes worked into them, and they smashed into the corn with vigor. That seemed to agitate the creatures further, and as we made little clearings in the corn, they came crashing out to hit our line. They battered at us, their arms as thick as tree branches, but we seemed to have them outnumbered. These weren't the same collection of botanists and silly creatures that we'd had at the War of Winter, and it was the low point of winter to boot. Spring was on the horizon, and these corn creatures were not as formidable as they had been on New Year's. As they started to fall back into the field, I could sense the Brandylow were feeling pretty powerful. Many of those assembled here had watched us struggle with the corn creatures, even with the help of two wizards, and it was invigorating to watch them backed into the corn with relative ease. Then the earth shook as the biggest corn creature I had ever seen began to rise from the field. He was massive, 10 feet, then 20, and as he rose, he seemed to threaten the mountain with his size. He was a hoary mass of vines and stalks, his legs as thick as the pillars that held up the Greek ruins in the magazines I had read as a kid, and his eyes glowered down at us with fury. As he rose up, I think we all sensed the futility of fighting him. He could fall on us like a tidal wave any time he felt like it. The Brandylow around me began to back away, and I could tell that the group would break soon and run. Those eyes were the worst thing about him. They looked like coals from hell as they surveyed us, and when his arms moved, he creaked and groaned like an oak in a high wind. He flexed his massive arms, preparing to smash us into paste, and that was when I saw the barker come running up. His coattails streamed out behind him, and he was waving his arms and screaming as the cacophony raged around him. "Stop! Stop! Corn Man! Listen to me! You and I have never been at odds with one another, and I would seek to end this without further bloodshed." The gargantuan looked down at him, looking ridiculously like a lion regarding a mouse, and his arms returned to its sides as it listened. "The Cold One calls," he thundered, and I heard snow shift on top of the mountain as his voice rose from the valley. "We are born of his power, Barker, and we must answer." I looked around, trying to assess if we were being played or not, but it seemed the Corn Man and the Barker had entered a battle of words in the midst of our skirmish. "We have no quarrel with thee, only with the one you serve." "Then why did you use fire against us and invade our field?" "You and yours attacked first, Corn Man, not us. Our fight is not with you, but we seek to see the scales return to balance." "Balanced scales? Of what do you speak?" the giant asked, but the question sounded perfunctory. "You know, as I do, that the Green Man has gone too far. His taking of the lady under a banner of peace was wrong. What's worse, he pressed the two of us into service and made us a party to his dishonor. You have always been a noble creature, operating under the rules of your legend and granting favor to those who prove worthy. If he had taken her at the end of a righteous siege, I would stand beside his actions. But he violated the laws of custom and accord, and that cannot stand." The Corn Man seemed to have no answer for this, and I felt some of the tension slip from him. "Let us through and take your corn creatures elsewhere. Leave the field, and let us make the scales right again." The Corn Man contemplated this, tilting his head as he thought it over, and making a sound like roots pulled up by a high wind as he did. The corn creatures had stopped their attack, pulling back to the cornfield as their master thought this over. And when he began to sink into the ground, the creatures ran back to the corn as it descended with him. As that massive head dipped down into the sheaf of green, I heard a voice like an Old Testament God come rumbling from the earth. "Once more, my friend, I will stand aside. Your words are true, and I will not come to the Cold One's call again. Farewell." The Corn Man and his minions descended into the ground, and as the corn disappeared, we found the brandy-low that had been taken as they lay in the mud. They were beyond saving, beaten to a pulp, and the blood would have been all over the corn if it hadn't sunk into the earth. Losing two to a force like this was something, but we could hardly weather the loss. God only knew what was waiting for us in the cave, and it might be all hands on deck when we got there. These two might make the difference between victory and joining the Corn Man in the ground. As the entrance to the cave loomed large before us, I wondered what else might be in store for us today. "We're going in," Randy said, "and we ain't coming out without her." I'd only thought it was dark outside, but as the cave swallowed us up, we were plunged into that formidable darkness of which fables are written about. The cave was just the way I remembered it from my dreams. The rock was an odd blue color, the stone so old it appeared to have dragged itself whole from the depths of the earth. The drip from the ceiling was constant, our hooves coming down in puddles of water more often than not. The tunnels were cut like the holes in Swiss cheese, and as we made our way deeper, I could feel anxiety coming off the others. We expected to meet something. We expected to find an army of pumpkin heads. We expected to find more corn creatures. We expected to be pushed back at any time, but the deeper we went without meeting anyone, the higher the tension rose. "I don't like it," Cannon said, moving up behind Randy. "I don't like it one bit." "You did not expect them to make it hard, did you?" Marta said. "I did expect that they would send in a few pumpkin heads or something," Randy said, his breath sounding very loud as it bounced off the walls of the slate cave. "We killed more than 36 of them in the 2 weeks that I've been traveling with you," Devin said, and I jumped because it was the first time I'd heard him speak. "I can't imagine he has many left. Pumpkins are a little out of season." "Even so, I expected something. The corn creatures couldn't have been it." We came into a wide cave, about as big as a cathedral, and this was where I had seen her in my dreams from earlier. She was still there, chained to a stalagmite near the center, her arms up and hanging from a ring bolt. She looked ragged. The garment she was wearing looked like an old bedsheet. Someone had been beating her. That much was obvious. Her face looked like hamburger meat. The bruises were even more black than blue, and it appeared that Tobias's fears had been justified. The green man hadn't gotten the response he wanted, and he had started working her over as her time got closer to coming full circle. "It's her," Randy said, and Marta's eyes became wet as she saw her. "I never dreamed I would see her again. I searched for her at the farthest reaches of the earth, but I never dreamed I would lay eyes on her." For a moment, we all just stood there and looked at her, as if we expected her to melt into nothing. "How do we approach this?" I asked, as the seconds stretched by and no one made a move. "I don't know," Randy said, swallowing a mouthful of spit. "In my wildest dreams, I never imagined I'd make it this far." I took a step, the others still seeming to be trapped in the moment, and as each step took me a little closer to the source of my joy, of my power, and I wasn't immediately struck down by an unseen hand, I felt my pace quickening. Something touched my ankle, and I nearly jumped away in fear before seeing that it was the Gordling. He had jumped from Randy's shoulder and was neck and neck with me as we came to the lady. She never stirred, but she was breathing. The chains were heavy-looking, and as I pulled out my cudgel to take a swing at them, I knew I was going to need something heavier than that. "Sam," she whispered, and I looked down to see her looking through her one good eye. The other was so swollen that it couldn't open at all, but her smile told me everything I needed to know. "I'm going to get you out of here. Is there a key? How do I—" "Sam!" Randy yelled, and when the lady screamed, I ducked as a huge blade passed low enough to nick my ear before slamming into the stalagmite. I looked up, expecting to see the green man, but instead, I looked up into the feline eyes of Wystanther. "You shouldn't have come," the elf growled, his normally cheerful face set in a mask of fury. "Now I have to kill you, right along with your friends." That was when the green man stepped out of the back of the cave, his ghostly armor looking very green in the primordial blue of the cavern. He was shorter than I remembered him, but I'd mostly seen him a horse the last time. Even so, he was still a very imposing 7 feet tall, his sword just as big and sharp as the last time I'd seen it. The darkness behind him rippled as a group of pumpkin heads came grinning in his shadow, each of them carrying some kind of weapon. Looks as if my pursuers have come right into my trap. Kill them all! No survivors! The Pumpkinheads cackled and danced as they flooded past him. Charge! Randy yelled, and the Brandylow shook the ceiling with their war cry as they came on the run. His swing had missed the lady and I, but just barely. Lysanther struggled, trying to get his blade free, and I took full advantage as I swung my cudgel at his head. It wasn't quite as refined a weapon as his Fey sword, but it had the advantage of an iron head. That was one thing I always remembered from the stories my gran had told me about the fairies. They were resilient, but they could be hurt, even killed, with cold iron. He dodged the club as it swung for his head, but when I swooped it down so it would connect with his chest, he was only saved from having it caved in by the armor that he wore. Even so, the armor made a very pretty smashing sound as it shattered like glass. Son of a... But he shut up as I punched him in the mouth. His sword was stuck in the stalagmite and his armor was busted up, but if I let him get his feet back under him, I'd be no match for his strength and speed. He was the champion of the Summer Fae, the general for Titania's troops, and he was so juiced up on Fae magic that he could probably cave my chest in with a single punch. Lysanther was used to fighting Fae. If I let him get an inch, I'd be dead. He spat up a mouthful of bright pink blood, and as he snarled at me, I punched him again. I kept hitting him, kept rocking his shit, and when his back hit the wall, I slammed my fist into the broken remains of his breastplate. I don't know if anyone has ever ground glass into your chest, but as my fist slammed into his armor, I cried out nearly as loud as he did. My knuckles bled and my arms burned, but I just kept hitting him. I smashed and smashed and smashed, and I started to think that I might be able to come out of this with the lady. Then Lysanther caught my fist and twisted it. My wrist broke cleanly, and I cried out as I stumbled away from him. You stupid animal, he growled, his speech thick with blood and pain. I have come too far to let you stand in my way. He was breathing heavily, his hand on his jaw as he approached the sword again. I hoped it had hurt him badly, though I couldn't have broken the jaw if he was talking. He moved in gingerly, testing it a few times before gripping the sword and wrenching it out. He was breathing heavily as he stood looming over her, and I looked for my club as he approached the lady. Why? She asked suddenly, her words freezing him in place. Why turn against me, Lysanther? We've always been close. Why would you hurt me? I couldn't see his face, but I could hear the sigh that escaped him. Why? Because, lady, I've stood by Titania's side for... He thought about it, but finally just shrugged. And in that time, I've heard her worry over you. Not whether you would succeed or what you would do, but when you might dethrone her. I would never, the lady said, sounding horrified. Why not? You do what she does. You control what she controls. There is no balance between the two of you, and even Mab knows it. Mab bullies your counterpart, but she fears him as well. You are outside the natural order. You're an anomaly, a freak, and for her to feel secure, for my queen to feel secure, I have to destroy you. Lysanther hefted the sword, and I glanced wildly for the club that I had dropped. It's nothing personal, he said, almost apologetically. I had honestly hoped that I could just seal you up, and that would fix things. But you got out. I saw then that if you could do it once, you could do it again. That means destroying you, is the best way to handle this situation.
"It was you," the lady whispered, nearly crying. "You sealed me in that statue. You didn't think the Green Man had the idea all on his own, did you? He's a brute, but he has his uses. I was merciful then, but I know better now. Goodbye, my lady." But he stopped when something little and orange hit him in the ankle. Wystanther looked down at the Gordling as he savaged his leg with his little pumpkin teeth. He laughed as he turned to give it his full attention. The lady moaned a little in her throat as she saw it. The creature worried at him, but its soft little teeth did very little to his armored leg. It was such a fierce little thing for a gourd, and as I found the handle of my club in the dark cave, I knew I'd never make it back in time to save either of them. Wystanther looked at her, shaking his head. That's what I think she fears the most about you. You inspire such devotion in these creatures. It's really quite astounding. However, his booted foot went right through the little Gordling as he fell in two halves as the Fey Knight kicked him to pieces. It's also unfair, since they're rarely very sturdy. Goodbye, then. This doesn't bring me any joy, but it is necessary. He raised the sword to cut her down, and that was when I lost it. Something about seeing that pile of smashed pumpkin guts, and the woman who was my everything, looking so terrified, sent me into a rage. I tackled him around the waist and threw him to the ground. He fell in a harsh screech of metal, but he kept holding his sword. I reared back to club him, rolling him so I could get him in the face. I was so angry. I hadn't always been fair to the little pumpkin guy, but he hadn't deserved that. He had come across multiple states and tracked her by sense alone, and he'd been brave in the face of things that saw him as compost. When she had needed him, he had tried to help her in his own way. He hadn't deserved to be pulped. He had deserved much better, and I felt like crying as I swung my club at Wystanther. I was going to make this asshole hurt the way that I hurt, but my blow never fell. He had shoved the tip of his sword into my chest, and the metal felt cold as it passed out the back of me. His face was furious, his eyes more winter than summer, and when he pushed the blade deeper, it took my breath away. "I am tired of being thrown down and pummeled by the likes of you. You are an ant. You are nothing to me. You are no champion to her. You're the dirt beneath my heels, and I have had enough of you." I closed my eyes and gritted my teeth. I had broken bones before. I had scraped my hands. I'd hit my head, and once I'd even cracked my tailbone and needed minor surgery. This was worse than all that. I hadn't been sure that I could die, but as his sword pushed into me, I could feel myself beginning to float a little. I was a goner. This was it. I supposed I wouldn't have to break my oath to Tobias. The foot of sword in my chest was going to do it for me. So with the last of my strength, I let gravity bring my arms and my body weight down. I rode that sword all the way to the hilt, but the metal tip of my club bashed every one of his stupid teeth out of his perfect mouth. I kept slamming my arms down as I buried him with my weight, and to my surprise, he didn't just shove me off. I summoned all the strength I could find, really tapped into the reserve, and just kept bashing into his stupid, smug face as my blood pattered onto him. He stopped moving after the 5th blow, but I didn't care. I rained nearly a dozen blows, smashing them into him. When my strength was exhausted, I lay still and felt my life ebbing away. This was it. I had succeeded. The sounds of battle were raging nearby, and I hoped my people were winning. I heard the chatter of gunfire. I guess cannon really did have some bullets left, and it mingled with the garbled French of Marta's battle cry. Randy cried out in his guttural rebel yell, and it sounded like whatever was going on, they were doing okay. That was good, I guess. I suppose I could die knowing that I'd saved her. She was yelling my name, but her voice was husky and fading. I wanted to turn and look at her, just one last look, but I couldn't summon anything else. It was tapped like a leaky keg, and I didn't have anything left for a last look. It was weird. You always hear that death is cold, but I was actually starting to sweat a little. It was really warm all of a sudden, and as my vision faded, I noticed a bright light coming from between Wysanther and I. I'd always imagined that the light was a metaphor or something, but no, here it was. It was rising from between us, ignoring all the blood and gore and slipping into me. The light had left Wysanther and gone into me. It had entered me. Suddenly, I was coming back. My vision was clearing. My strength was returning. And as I sat up and reached for the sword, I slid it out as easily as Arthur from the stone. It weighed no more than my club, and as I looked down at the dead Fey Knight, he dissolved into more light that seemed to fly to me. The light flew into me, filling me with a radiance I'd never known. And when I looked down, I was wearing the armor of Titania's knight. It was new, remade just for me. And when I turned to question the lady, she looked shocked. "Oh, God, Sam, what have you done?" I don't know. What have I done? I thought I was dying. Smoothly, with less effort than I would swat a fly, I swung the sword and broke her chains. The lady fell onto the stone, and I got down so I could help her. She'd fallen next to the destroyed Gordling, and as my eyes fell on him, I felt some of my joy ebb away. I reached out a hand to the pieces of the brave little thing, not really intending to do anything, but something happened nonetheless. With a flash of light, they came back together, and the Gordling shook itself as it yarked and jumped to butt against my hand. I was happy to see him, really I was, but what the hell was going on? Suddenly I heard a harsh cry and looked down into the carnage not far away from me. The Brandula were beating them back, but not without losses. The Pumpkinheads were numerous, and they were quick. They had killed about 8 of us in the short time that Wysanther and I had been fighting, and they were beginning to back the remaining Brandula into a corner. Nearby, Randy and the Green Man were trading blows. His club was splintered, and the huge sword the armored knight was wielding trailed frost with each sweep. Randy had a hand on his chest, the wound there a long and jagged thing, and the Green Man lifted his blade as he prepared to end him. I was moving before I really meant to. I slammed into the Green Knight, much as I had another knight recently, and he stumbled. I put myself between Randy and the Winter Lord, and when I lifted my sword to point at him, The green man seemed unsure. Hell, Randy seemed unsure of what was going on either. And as the two of them goggled at me, I decided to see how far I could push this. The lady is free and your partner is dead. It's over, you Scooby-Doo fuck. Now kick rocks. Take your pumpkin patch kids with you, too. I got a long bus ride ahead of me, and I've had quite enough weirdness for today. Thank you. I must have said something right, because the green man did just that. He took a step back, then another, and as the darkness swarmed up to block his escape, I saw that the pumpkin heads were leaving too. A cheer went up from the Brandylow as they gathered around us, and I went back to the lady to make sure she was okay. She was sitting with the Gordling, the little pumpkin pleased as punch to see her, and I took off my new cloak when I noticed her shivering. "Guess he wasn't as tough as he looked," I said, sheathing my sword. "He turned tail pretty quick once he got a look at me." "It wasn't you," she whispered, pointing a shaky finger over my shoulder. "He felt something bigger coming." I turned around just in time to see a shimmering portal open and see the Queen of Light and Life and the Queen of Air and Darkness step into the cave. I'd seen Titania flustered, but I had rarely seen her angry. Today, however, she was livid. "Someone has killed my knight and stolen his power, and I will be damned if I let such an affront stand." Oops. Guess I had some explaining to do. I stood before Titania, and then decided that might be a little forward, so I took a knee. No sense getting off on the wrong foot with a new employer. "Queen Titania, Lady of Light and Life, Queen of Evergreen, it was I who slew the knight." I saw her anger rising. Don't let anyone tell you that summer isn't a season that can kill you, and lifted my hands as the power crackled inside of me in kind. But, I had just cause to do so. Titania looked at me hotly, clearly doubting it. "And you will be given a chance to speak your piece, knight. You will return to Summer Hall with me and my sister, and you will answer for your crimes." That didn't sound like such a good idea. Once I was in Summer Hall, Titania could just quietly disappear me, and no one was going to say anything about it. The lady wouldn't be at full strength for some time, and I would be stuck in Fae for God knew how long. There was also the matter of needing her to corroborate my story, and I realized that would be my out. "That is a fine invitation, my queen. May I bring my friends with me, though? I will need their testimony to prove the truth of my words. The lady was a witness to the actions of Wysanther, and I will need her to speak for me on this matter." Titania gritted her teeth. She clearly had wanted to get me alone so she could assess my worth in private and perhaps be rid of me. Bringing others into this would complicate things, but she could hardly decline. To do so would invite speculation that my trial had been little more than a kangaroo court, and Titania would want to avoid any questions about the validity of my likely execution when I was found guilty. If there was one thing I had learned from sitting in on monthly council meetings, it was that the Fae and the residents of Fae were big on rules and intrigue. "Very well. You and the lady may come with us to Summer Hall. Further, I will bring your friends to bear witness that justice was properly served. Come," she commanded, and I felt myself moving forward without meaning to. The lady rose, slowly, but she did rise, and followed. The Gordling was in her arms, nuzzling at her and looking at me with his worried little eyes. If a little pumpkin was worried for my chances, then I felt maybe I should be a little more afraid, too. We went through the doorway that she had come through, and the brandy-low came behind us. I suppose that Randy had been listening, and he organized them and told the newer ones to be quiet and respectful. They were silent as they stepped from the dank cave in Arkansas to a warm and welcoming hall in a pocket of Fae. Summer Hall was a place I had been once or twice before, and it was a riot of flowers and moss and trees and greenery. The whole place reminded me of a house left in the woods to be reclaimed, and I'd always enjoyed coming here. It was nice and eternally warm, and it made me feel peaceful in a way I hadn't since I was a child. It did until that very moment, at least. Titania's summer fae had assembled, and I could see satyrs and centaurs standing beside brownies and gnomes. There were dryads and forest spirits, a few of the tree guardians that were even older than the ones we had in the park, and as well as a smattering of Tolkien-esque humanoids like dwarves and elves and such. They circled us, hemming us in like we might escape, and they did not look friendly. Titania lifted her hand, and a dais of wood and moss rose for she and Mab to sit upon. "Now," she said, her voice still as hot as a summer heat wave, "speak your truth, and we will hear it. We will hear, and we will judge." Gulp. "May I begin by saying that regardless of the outcome, my friends and my lady are blameless in these matters. Randy and his group of Brandylow were searching for the lady, who'd been kidnapped by the Green Man. They were there to rescue her, and they took no part in my actions." "Noted," Titania said, and I imagined that I could hear her jaw click. "Now, present your evidence, knight." I nodded, clearing my throat as I continued. "I was in the cave to rescue the lady. I had come with an artifact that would help me find her, and we did, as you can see. When I attempted to free her, I was attacked by Wysanther. And did you attempt to parley with my knight or kill him outright? Wysanther was also searching for your lady, and there may have been a mistake. My apologies, my queen. It was a little hard to parley when someone was trying to cut my head off. But she cut me off." "So you admit that you made no attempt to speak with him?" "He knew us," I said, adding, "my queen," just in the nick of time. "How do you know? You spoke no words to him, by your own admission," Mab said slyly. I got the impression that she knew what was happening, and she was enjoying the show too much to spoil it. "He spoke to us. I did attack him. That much is true." "And with cold iron, no less," Titania added, sounding horrified. "But it was in defense of my mistress. I defended her with the same fervor you would expect your knight to defend you." Titania sat back a little at that, chewing it over. "It is impressive that you slew a member of my court, one imbued with a measure of my power, with nothing but a club and good luck. Impressive, but it still doesn't answer how you know he was with the Green Man." I started to tell her, but it appeared that my witness was ready to speak. "He told us," the lady husked, clutching the Gordling tight as he trembled. "Lady," Titania began, some of her anger ebbing, "you needn't strain yourself. We know how much you have suffered these past few months." "She absolutely dideth," I thought to myself, but the lady pressed on. "I must, or you'll put my friend to death. Wysanther attacked him when he tried to free me. Once he had thrown him off, he turned to deal with me, and I asked him why he would do such a thing. He said it was..." She hesitated, trying to gather her strength and make the accusation. He said it was because of you, though not at your command. He said he had worried over you much in the past many years. He said you were afraid I would take your power. My queen, I would never do such a thing. I am your guest here. You took me in when no one else would. You are my queen and my friend. I would never seek to wrong you." Titania sucked in a breath and seemed taken aback by this. "Is this true, knight? Did my old knight speak so?" "He did. He accused her of planning treason and said it was his duty to end her treasonous plans. As her defender, it was my job to stop him." "By any means necessary?" Titania asked. "As he would defend you, yes," I countered. "So you killed him?" "As he nearly killed me," I said, tapping my chest where the sword wound likely lay. "And now you stand before me, bedecked in his power. He was also allied with the Green Man, someone who has been cast out of Fae at the agreement of you and Queen Mab." Titania raised an eyebrow at that. "I suppose he told you that, too." "He did. He claimed responsibility for placing the lady in a statue as well. He admitted to sealing her away with his own lips." Titania nodded. "When I heard she had been sealed away, I suspected as much. I believed the Green Man had used winter magic on her, but I should have looked closer to home, I suppose." She looked at Mab, the two deliberating quietly, before turning back to me. "This still doesn't free you from the responsibility of killing my knight," Titania said, "or for stealing his power." "I stole no power," I began, but she put a hand up to stop me. "Whether stealing it was your intention or not, you stole it. The power of the knight is not something that is won through combat, not for many, many centuries, and by accepting it, you have stolen my right to choose a new knight." "Which was not my intention," I said again, getting scared now. "If they saw this as theft, then I could be in for a lot of trouble." "That is irrelevant," Mab spat, clearly growing bored. "Whether you meant to take it or not is moot. You have it, and we cannot take it from you so long as you live." There was silence for a moment, the words dropping over us like cold rain. "What does that mean?" I asked, afraid of the answer. "It means you must surrender the power. And your life," Titania said. She had the good grace to look ashamed as she said it, at least. The crowd, however, had started to come towards us. They had weapons, more weapons than I had, and I knew that I'd be buried if they decided to charge. Titania was getting ready to drop the might of the summer fae on me, and there was very little I could do about it. "Hold," the lady said, her voice raspy but confident. "Queen Titania, it is my understanding that the Lady of Summer chooses her knight. Is that not correct?" Titania slitted her eyes. "It is. However, as you know, I have no Lady of Summer. She was, unfortunately, killed a few years ago, and I have yet to name another." "You have not named a Lady of Summer, but you have offered it." "And was refused," Titania said, her temper rising. "I will accept it, if you would still have me. I will become your summer lady, and officially join your court, if I may pick my knight, which is the custom." Titania rolled her eyes. "Such theatrics. I accept your appointment. Come, kneel before me and pledge your fealty. I shall grant you your name and titles as befit your station." The lady handed me the gordling and knelt before Titania. Power passed between them. I could feel it. And when she rose, the court cheered and hailed the new Lady of Summer. "I suppose you have a knight in mind," she asked, leaning her cheek on her hand as she flicked a hand at me. I do. I will be keeping your current knight. Sam will remain my knight of summer and stay by my side to protect me. So spoken, so it may be. Sam, stand before me and pledge your fealty. The lady and I exchanged the happy little pumpkin again, and I drew my sword and knelt before the fairy queen. Do you swear to serve the Summer Fae as their champion, to heed my command, and to protect my people in my name? I do, I intoned. Do you swear to fight those who would stand against me, whoever they may be? I do. Then rise, Knight of Summer, and be welcome. The cheers weren't as loud as they had been for the lady, but they were a welcome change from the noises that had preceded them. It appeared that, for better or worse, I had taken on some new and interesting job responsibilities. Tobias looked up expectantly as we stepped into the grow house, but his eyes grew wide when he saw my armor and the gown of summer flowers worn by the lady. The 24 brandy-low that came with us didn't hurt either, and as they spilled out into the park, Randy staying behind with us, the old goat laughed and shook his head. It appears that you have found more than the lady in that cave. I shrugged. You could say that. He turned to the lady, and I could see his eyes grow wet as he embraced her. You finally took Titania up on her offer, I see. It was time. As an official member of the court, the Green Man will think twice about bothering us in the future. Titania has given me leave to make this place my home, though I'm sure that she will call Sam and I often. She is quite furious with me for using her offer as an excuse to save someone she had labeled a thief, but she will over it. I have no doubt, Tobias said. Well, I know you have more pressing matters to attend to, but we really must talk about getting the park back into its former glory. I have some ideas about our spring event. If you'll follow me over here, As soon as he led her off to the whiteboards that he had scribbled on in the corner, Randy put a hand on my shoulder and smiled. Imagine, about 2 years ago, you were a wet-behind-the-ears security guard, and now you command the armies of summer. As far as glow-ups go, kid, this is a big one. I laughed. True. To think my parents said I'd never amount to anything. I closed my eyes, just as the lady had shown me, and my armor vanished, replaced by something a little less made of fairy metal. It's good to be back, Randy said, taking a snootful of air as we came out of the grow house and into the park. What will you do now? I asked him. He smiled. I think I'm going to go find a nice shady spot and have a nap. I've earned some time off, I think. I joined him, and we spent the afternoon with him telling me about his travels. It was good to have him home, and weirdness or not, it was good to be home again. We came out into the laundromat at what my watch told me was 11:30. I'd eaten a little with the refugees, and we'd gone over the map of the impound yard for a while before Joseph and I set out. The laundromat still smelled like old soap and dust, the hint of dryer sheets and the tang of old liquids, and Joseph told me to check out front before he slid the dryer back into place. I went to the door, peeking at the dark street, and told him it looked clear as he slid the unit back into place. The streets were dark, the street lights mostly just flickering inconsistencies out here, but it didn't seem to bother Joseph. Dark is best. We can move a little faster if they can't see us. We came up the dark back street, the storefronts unlit and the sidewalks empty, and it was strange how much it reminded me of the town on the farm. The buildings looked down on us, almost accusingly, the dark windows like eyes full of angry devils. Joseph seemed intent on taking back roads, As we came out of the outskirts, I could see the main street was still bright and inviting. I suppose the Bright had no time for trivial things like radio shacks and laundromats. They were more worried about the outward facade than the town itself, and it showed. The buildings back here were utterly abandoned, the rats their only keepers. And as we cut down the side streets and headed back into the darkness, I could see lit windows on our left and pitch-black eyes on our right. "Not much further," Joseph whispered. "We should be behind the hardware store, so another 2 blocks, and we'll come to the sheriff's office." "Do we need to go around?" I asked, but Joseph shook his head. "Nah, the backside should be dark this time of night. We can come right around the back of the impound, and you can make your entrance there." We came up the dark back streets, passing another place he said was a convenience store, but the back of the sheriff's department was still lit up, bright enough to flare off the windows behind it. Joseph sucked in a breath, clearly not expecting this. I could hear low voices from inside, people speaking close together as they discussed whatever had them up so late. But as we came under one of the windows, I heard a very different voice raised in anger. I'd heard it for the first time today, but I could never mistake it for anyone else. "This is getting us nowhere, Sheriff. She's seen too much, and now she's loose. We need her back before she starts talking about things to the wrong people." "I'm doing my best, Miss Mary, but there's a lot of ground to cover out there, and excuses and more excuses. Why do we let you run this town, Sheriff? Has the Bright possibly misplaced its confidence in you? Do we need to find someone else to watch over Tylerville?" There was a pregnant pause after that one, and I imagine the sheriff was weighing his answer very carefully. "We are doing all we can, ma'am. I have 5 deputies and 2 cars. We have 4 of them out running the roads to see if she's hitchhiking, but Tylerville only has 2 roads, one in and one out. If she's hitchhiking up one of those roads, then we'll find her. But if she's made contact with one of these refugee groups, then there's no telling where she is." Miss Mary made a sound, loud and full of disgust. "These refugees, these resistance groups that you still haven't done anything about, may have my daughter. You don't seem to see a problem with that either, Sheriff. Tell me, why do you seem so glib? Are you maybe hoping that she gets to someone from the outside, someone that can look into this, someone who could throw this whole thing on its ear and maybe let you go back to being some good old boy Okie cop who has nothing more to worry about than parking tickets?" Someone hit the table, and I didn't need to peek over the rim of the window to know that the sheriff had probably had enough of being spoken to in such a way by a woman who probably looked like she'd had her hair set on fire recently. I took a quick peek and saw her standing there, her hair looking frizzed up and standing in kinky curls from her nearly bald head. She didn't seem to care about any of this bluster, but he blustered anyway. "I've had about enough of this. I've been your good little toady for a while, and I've done more than you or anyone else here. Hell, I gave you the town when you asked. Now you sit here and question my loyalty. Where do you get off? You..." "Careful, Daniel," she said, and the sound of his name seemed to stagger him. "You may be the law, but I am a disciple of the light. You need to take a trip up to the cathedral, maybe? Do you need to see the Bright again?" The sheriff took a step back from her. Seemed like the last thing he wanted to do was stand before that bright ball of light again. The officer beside him was sitting with his head down, and though he appeared to be looking at the map, it was clear that he was trying to distance himself from this conversation. The sheriff looked like he wanted to be absent from the conversation too, and as he sat there, he shook his head. "No, ma'am, I don't need another trip to the woodshed." She smirked. "Good. Call your deputies. Get them to check the roads again. After that,
I want you to jump into that brand new 4x4 you have in the parking lot and go search the trails. Let your deputy here man the phones. I want you out doing something about this, Sheriff. You want I should put a bullet in her, too, when I find her? The sheriff asked, his sarcasm hidden like a barb. Mary started to answer, but suddenly she looked at the space I was occupying with interest. I popped down again, putting my back to the wall, but I could still feel those eyes on me. Had she seen me? Who could say, but I had to glance up, at least a little, to make sure that she wasn't looking down at me. I put my hands over my mouth when I looked up and saw her looking out the window. Squeezed as tightly as I could against the wall, but I needn't have bothered. It was too dark in the alley to see much, and she would have been glare blind from the office lights. It was probably the only thing that saved me from being seen, and when the sheriff spoke, she turned away from the window and sighed in relief. What? Is someone out there? Nothing. Just a reflection, I guess. I want her found and brought in alive. I have to have her alive. You understand me? I don't care if you have to run her over to stop her, but I need her alive when she comes to the Bright. The sheriff made some sound of confirmation, and as they moved out of the room, I slid along the wall towards Joseph. He'd been waiting for me, pushed up against the wall as he hid, and when I came even with him, he asked if I had been seen. I shook my head, and that seemed to be enough for him. Good. Come on, he said, and the two of us scuttled off towards the impound lot. I heard tires on the main road, something that was less than 10 feet away, but I ignored it. They weren't looking in the back alleys for us. They'd been told to check the woods and the roads out of town, and James's initial evaluation of the situation seemed to be spot on. With so much law enforcement on the road, it wouldn't be hard for me to get in and out without being noticed. I was in the walk-through between the sheriff's department and the storage building next door when my mother's voice froze me in place. Incompetent non-believers. We should have put our own people in his position a long time ago. Someone who wouldn't question the Bright in its infinite wisdom. What happens if we don't find her? Said a man in overalls, and in profile, the left side of his face looked shiny. Miss Mary shrugged. So what if he doesn't? It complicates matters, but it might be good to have a few FBI agents under the Bright's sway. Regardless, they can't do anything here. Tylerville is our place, plain and simple. The rest of them will fall to heels soon enough. She had her back to me, her companion clearly not seeing me, and as I slipped into the alley, I prayed they hadn't noticed. We had to get this done before they got bored with the woods and moved into town. Here we are, Joseph said, as we came to the edge of a chain-link parking lot. Around the back is going to be your best bet. Just snip along the base and head in. Not coming with me? I asked. Nope, I'm heading back. It's getting a little hot around here for me. Before I do, though, he said, reaching in and taking out a little book, I want you to have this. I looked at it, thinking it looked like any journal you might find at a Walmart or a Dollar General. It's the story of how things got this bad. You told me that you were telling people about the Bright access online, so maybe you could tell them about Tylerville, too, the way it used to be. It might help the cops take you seriously, too, if you manage to get up with the FBI. Thank you, I said, slipping it into my pocket. Thank you for everything. I know you've tried to look after your own, but I don't think I'd have made it here, or to the farm, without you. Hopefully, it all means something. Good luck, Angel. We parted ways then, and I fished the wire cutters out of my backpack so I could start snipping. It wasn't as easy as they make it look in the movies. The rungs were rusty and didn't seem to want to part, and I had to lean on the cutters to make it through. I figured that if I could snip
6 or 7 of them, I might be able to make it in. I had 3 rungs snipped apart when I heard the scuff of boots and stood very still. A beam of light was about 15 feet from me, and someone was calling out to see if someone was there. I got as still as I could, praying that I hadn't been caught. I stood at the back fence, as still as I could get, and hoped the guard would move on. "Someone there?" the guard said, and his flashlight beam slid over the spot where I had been crouched only a moment before. If he came any closer, if he looked too closely, he would see me, and it would all be for nothing. The thought that this one person could stand in the way of my escape was unthinkable. But as I crouched there and tried not to shake, I knew that I would have to run if he caught sight of me. The thought of fleeing Tylerville on foot was not something that appealed to me, but the alternative was even worse. I would run rather than go back to that terrible light. I had to escape so I could help Joseph, James, Margot, and everyone who was trapped in the sewer. I had to escape so that hopefully they could escape. "Come out if you're there. I won't hurt you." I didn't move. I just kept praying that he'd get bored and walk away. Instead, he took another step toward the fence. I just knew that any minute now, he would see me. "Come out where I can see you," he said, his voice taking on a note of fear. "Come out now. I know there's someone there." I stayed still, hoping he didn't have a gun or he might open fire on me out of hand. I counted to 5, then counted to 5 again. When the light turned away, I heard his shoes heading away from the fence, and I had to cover a sigh with my hand. Must just be a cat or something. I waited until I could no longer hear the clop of his footwear, and I started cutting again. The fence was old, the links hard to separate, and I had to turn my head as rust pattered down on me. I'd be coughing soon, I could feel it, and as the hole finally came open, wide enough for me to slip in, I covered my mouth as I pulled it back a little. I stepped in, leaving the cutters by the fence so that someone could get them later, but as I slid inside, something pulled my shirt. I winced as it caught on my shirt and pulled the fabric back as I tried to get out of its reach. I was still listening for the sound of those shoes again. I tried to free my shirt as quietly as possible. I could hear the fence shaking, and if the guard was anywhere close, then he was going to hear me. I winced as something sharp cut my back and tried to get my breathing under control before I had a panic attack. I was trying to get my heart rate down when I heard shoes and saw a light coming my way. I stayed very still, reaching back slightly as I tried to find where I was hooked. The light was coming closer, the guard mumbling something as he swooped it right and left. I found the spot, a sharp bit digging into the small of my back. But as I moved it, I could hear something grit under a shoe from about 5 feet away. I froze, not daring to breathe at all since it might rattle the fence even a little. I just crouched there, sure that I was caught, but in the deafening silence, I heard the guard mumble something under his breath, and I had to stifle a laugh. "'Cause I got friends in low places where the whiskey..." He was singing, probably listening to music as he went about his rounds, and I hadn't heard a bit of what was going on over here. I had been saved, it would seem, by a pair of earbuds and Garth Brooks. What a twist. He moved off then, heading back to wherever he probably sat until it was time to do another round, and I stayed still until the crunch of those shoes was gone. I came through the hole, not even bothering to push it back like I had intended. I was guessing that the guard walked about every half hour or so I had a little bit to find my truck and get out of there before he came around again. Hopefully it wasn't booted or blocked in or something, and as I came inside, my eyes were already roving for my beat-up old truck. For a small town, there certainly weren't a lot of vehicles in the impound lot. The lot was about half an acre, maybe, but it was packed with vehicles of all makes and models. Cars, trucks, bikes, electric, gas, it was all here, and waiting for whatever they were doing with them. I assumed they were selling them somehow, a police auction or something, but it didn't appear to be happening all that quickly. I crouched low, making my way slowly through the lot as I listened for the guard. I was taking too long, I knew that, and if this place had a camera system, then I was probably already in trouble. The overhead lights left a lot of dark spots that might help me if Mr. Security Guard got too close. I was looking around frantically, constantly touching my keys to make sure I hadn't dropped them. It was like a talisman. As long as I had them, then I could make my break once the time was right. I would have thought it might have stood out. The old truck was primered gray with white spots that had just never been painted. But the lot was a slew of compact cars and SUVs and nice new trucks that looked tiny next to mine. I was just thinking that if it was still sitting where I had parked it, and I hadn't thought to check, I was going to kick myself when I heard the harsh grate of boots on concrete again. I pressed myself against two cars, parked close enough that someone was probably going to have to get them out with a crane, squeezing in between their dusty paint jobs as I got low. I saw the flashlight and heard him whistling something by Toby Keith, I thought. And when he moved off, I peeked out and came face to face with what I was looking for. There it was, sitting between a hatchback and a Hyundai, looking bored and a little dumb, as if it were just waiting for me to get my ass in line. I came across the little road and judged that I could get out if I was very careful. If there was a gate, then I would go through it, and I would go through Mr. Security Guard, too, if he wanted to get in my way. Like it or not, I was leaving, and as the truck came to life, I was already putting it into gear when a hand closed over my shoulder. I turned, slipping it into neutral by mistake, and doing nothing more than revving my engine like an idiot, as Mr. Security Guard tried to yank me out of the truck. I knew it. I knew I heard somebody. I don't know how you got in, Missy, but I'm glad I caught you. The sheriff will probably give me a promotion for bringing you in. Then I can stop pulling graveyard shift in the impound lot. While he was talking, I'd been looking for something to hit him with. I hadn't brought a gun or a knife or anything, and I didn't usually keep anything heavy in the truck. I was trying to yank away, one hand on the steering wheel while the other was grasping desperately, and when the hand came around the handle of something, I let my adrenaline fuel me as I flung it with all my might. As it flew past me, a corner ruffling my hair,
I saw that it was the little TV that had started all this. It was still pristine, still as treacherous as ever, and I knew from experience that while portable, it was very heavy. Heavy enough to end the monologuing of my would-be captor as it crashed into his nose. Blood spurted out as it broke his nose, and I popped the truck into drive as his fingers loosened, and I drove off as the door slammed shut and he fell against the hatchback beside me. I glanced in the rearview mirror to see him slumped against the piece of old car, looking dazed as his nose poured blood. The gate wasn't locked, and it snarled angrily as I came through it and put the pedal to the metal as I drove for home. The town of Tylerville loomed dark and foreboding around me, and I almost expected the buildings themselves to stand up and bar my way. No blue and whites rose up to block my path. No angry mobs surfaced. And as I flew out of town, I lowered my speed a little to a nice, reasonable 55. I didn't need to get picked up by a state trooper who was just doing his job for going 85 on the interstate. I kept my eyes open for lights in the rearview mirror, but they never came. I hope I hadn't killed the guy. He'd been trying to stop me, but I didn't have any ill will toward him. For all I knew, he was just doing his job like everyone else. My old truck was no supercharger, though, and I was really hoping to get some distance between me and Tylerville before they noticed what had happened. I couldn't outrun a police cruiser any more than I could outrun a police radio, and every mile I put between myself and the town without seeing a police chase was a moment I cherished. I drove until my truck was out of gas, and I spent 10 minutes at the most nerve-wracking fuel-up that I'd ever had. I paid $50 to fill the tank and didn't stop until I got home, where I fell into Grandma's arms when she opened the door and tried to tell her what had happened. She made tea, she got out cakes, and she had me tell her the whole story again while she made notes and took down evidence for later. She asked for names, times, dates, locations, and addresses when she thought I might have them. And when she was done, she told me to sit in the guest bedroom and rest, because she was going to make some phone calls. I laid down for a while, still shaking as I pulled my knees to my chest. And when she knocked on the door and asked if Sheriff Weeman could come talk to me, I told her that was fine. I'd known Sheriff Weeman my whole life, and despite his name, he was very large and very imposing. Angel, I'm going to tell you what your grandmother says you told her, and you're going to tell me if that's what happened. Sound fair? I nodded, not really wanting to tell it again. She says you've been looking for your mom. Someone on the internet led you astray and nearly got you picked up by human traffickers or some such thing. You escaped them with the help of some other people who were also being trafficked by them and injured someone claiming to be a police officer on the way out of town. You escaped, got your truck, and came to talk to me because you felt safe around your old sheriff. I'd about cover it? I nodded slowly, telling him it sounded just like what had happened. And that's what I'm going to tell anybody who comes asking about you in relation to Tylerville, he said, flipping a page over and licking his pencil. Now, you tell me what really happened. So I told him. I told him about the show, about the woman who claimed to be Miss Mary, about the chat room, the movie store, Tylerville, the people in the sewers, the Bright Church, and the Bright Farm, about my escape, my theft of my vehicle from impound, and how I'd gotten here. It took a surprisingly short time to tell it all, and when he put his pencil away and nodded, I had to add something. Sheriff, please don't go to Tylerville. They'll get you too. I've seen it happen. You've always been so good to me, and I don't want something to happen to you. He ruffled my hair, but I could tell he didn't take me seriously. Don't worry, kiddo. I have no intention of going anywhere. This place sounds spooky anyway. No, what I do intend to do is call a friend of mine who works with the FBI so I can put this place on his radar. I kept an eye on the news, but nothing came up about Tylerville or the Bright Farm or anything. If the FBI ever went down to the place, they never sent them back to my door. What I entered into was a kind of agreement. As long as I didn't make my presence known to them, they would do the same. I never saw the show again, and I never went looking for it. I gave up on knowing my mom. She clearly gave up on me a long time ago. I've been reading Joseph's journal, and the story of Tylerville is as tragic as it is fascinating. Maybe when I feel a little more comfortable, I'll read you some of it. For now, thanks for coming on this journey with me, and I hope you enjoyed the ride.
Dr. Pamela Winters wasn't tired. She was exhausted. She'd seen no less than 30 clients today. She would have said such a thing was impossible, but she'd had 8 emergency appointments, on top of her 22 regular clients. She'd called Juliet around noon and let her know that this was way too many, and Juliet had apologized profusely, but said that it couldn't be helped. "It's the new year, Doc. You know January's our busiest time." Pamela sighed. She did know that, but she had hoped that this year would be the exception. Something about the holidays always brought out the anxiety in her clients, many of which had phantom twinges when they tried to remember family members or loved ones that winter had erased from their consciousness. This led many of them to make emergency appointments to see the good doctor, and Winter would spend every day till mid-February taking memories and giving peace to the minds of her broken flock. It was nearly 8 o'clock. Maggie was already asking if she was coming home tonight, and Dr. Winter had just filed the last of her paperwork when a high-pitched scream came from the hallway outside her office. "What now?" Winter said, putting her pen back in the caddy and stepping out into the hallway. Her new housekeeper, Jennifer, was clutching her chest and scooting backwards on her butt, the bucket she had been carrying laying on its side not far off. She was staring into the dark exam room, her back coming up against the wall as she scooted to the other wall, and Winter came out on the run. She was afraid of what she might find in there. The town was full of curveballs, but as the lights came on, she saw it was just one of her patients, though she doubted that he had an appointment. I was just going to put the bags in the can," Jennifer said, sputtering, "and he said something from the dark and it scared me near to death. The room was empty a minute ago. I swear, Doc, I can't imagine how he got in there. All the doors are locked and... She was rambling, her hands clutching like dying spiders, and Winter patted her on the shoulder as she helped her up. "It's fine, Jennifer. Why don't you go on ahead home and rest? I'll worry with him." Are you sure, ma'am? I swear, I don't know how he's a very special client. It's fine. I'll lock up behind him and see you tomorrow, bright and early." Jennifer didn't seem to want to leave her boss with the strange man, but Pamela assured her that everything would be fine. This happened more than anyone would believe, and after showing the frustrated housekeeper out, Pamela went back to the man on the couch who was staring at the dots on the ceiling. It was the dark-haired man, because of course it was, and he seemed to be in a bad way. The writer, she reminded herself. He's a writer. But Winter didn't think that she had ever read anything that he had written. Maybe she had, she couldn't help thinking. Maybe she wasn't reading it so much as she was living it. She put that out of her head before it could take root, and came into the exam room a little red-faced. "You have got to stop doing this," she said, taking a seat across from him. "I have business hours and a receptionist, and—" "Who am I?" he said, very suddenly. Pamela blinked, inhaling slowly as she watched his eyes jitter around. Whatever he was seeing on the ceiling, she didn't want to see it. "You know who you are. You're the writer. You write." "But who am I?" he said again, turning those strange eyes to her as if asking if she were his mother. Winter tapped her notepad with her pen, trying to come up with a lie or a comfortable half-truth, and just deciding on the facts. "I don't know. I'm not sure who you are. I didn't bring you here like the others. I think you were here before me." "How could I be here before you?" he asked, turning back to look at the ceiling. Winter didn't know. She didn't really remember how she'd come to be here. She only remembered that she had. She had come out of that hole in the ground in the woods, the one that people seem to go missing around sometimes, and it would not have surprised her to discover it went all the way to hell. She wandered in the woods for a while, looking for something, but she didn't remember much about those times. She found the town, Kashmir, and settled here, and after a while, she felt called by people to come and help them. Sometimes she took away their memories. Sometimes she brought them here, but when she brought them to Kashmir, they stayed here. Oh, sure, they went to Atlanta on vacation or Tennessee for a hike, but they always came back, and they never seemed to want to leave for long. Except for him. He was different. The writer never left. The writer never went anywhere. He stayed in the town. He stayed home. And when he had megrims like this, he came to Dr. Winters, and she made them go away. Winter thought he might have been her first client, but sometimes it was hard for Winter to remember things. She remembered the time before coming here, and she remembered the time after opening the clinic. She remembered bringing people here from somewhere else. She remembered bringing Marguerite here, and the two of them making a life. She remembered her friends. She remembered her brothers. She remembered so many things, but she couldn't remember how she had gotten here. I don't remember how I got here," he said, his hands fidgeting on his chest like nervous birds. "I was just here one day. Did I make this place? Am I the architect or the prisoner, the patient or the doctor? I'm scared, Pamela. I'm scared of what will happen if I ever forget this place." Dr. Pamela Winters longed to reach out and touch him, to take his memories from him and devour them. She could feel the thin runner of saliva as it slid from the corner of her mouth, but as her hands began to reach towards him, something happened. It wasn't as if a physical barrier appeared between them. It wasn't as if she were repelled by an outside force. It was solely her will that stopped her. The act of touching him had always made her feel some way, but it wasn't until recently that she had a word for it. It would be blasphemy to touch him. It would be the most unrighteous of follies. "But you want to anyway," he said, and she realized that he was looking at her again. Even if it would unmake creation itself, you would do it. Isn't that so? You would profane yourself. You would debase yourself. You would go against your very nature if it meant a single look at the truth that lies within me. Isn't that so? He wasn't himself, Winter knew. Sometimes he got like this. Sometimes he was as doubled in his nature as she was. And sometimes this creature with the commanding voice came forth and spoke to her of want and desire. When he spoke like this, it was the voice of her father, the voice of Gabriel as he came to chastise the damned, the voice of a just and unloving God. "Answer me, Pamela Winters," he shouted, and she felt compelled in a way that she rarely felt. "Yes," she said, sobbing a little as she did. "Yes, God, yes. I want to see inside you so badly that it hurts me. But my hands know that such things would be folly. They know it with the certainty that Pandora knew it when she opened her box, that Eve knew it when she bit the apple, that my mother knew when she let my bastard father inside her." She was crying, the tears thick and greasy as they slid down her face. Her mascara was running, but who cared? She was nothing more than a sounding board for a thunderclap, the yes-man of an earthquake. She could not deny him, this nameless writer of terrible truth, but he could deny her. He smiled in the face of her apprehension, and it was the smile of a child who has discovered that he can pull the wings off insects and not be stopped by any god, loving or otherwise. "I could make you," he whispered through the crooked teeth of that smile. "I could make you take this terrible knowledge into you. Would you like that?" "No," Pamela moaned. "No," Winter moaned. They were the same moan, the same negation, but they were also not. Dr. Winters reached for the writer, her hands shaking as her trained and trusted fingers came closer and closer to his vault of unknowable secrets. "Stop it!" Pamela begged. Her traitorous hands were coming closer, the fingers trembling, and suddenly she smelled something not unpleasant as her face came closer to the man on the couch. She could smell his shampoo as her face came closer, off-brand dandruff shampoo, the tang of tea tree oil in it, making her wrinkle her nose, assaulted her, but her hands longed to touch, to learn, to know. "Stop!" Winter commanded, but it was unheeded. Her hands were nearly in his hair now, the soft locks within easy reach. She sat like that for 30 seconds, her tears coming again, before she felt as if invisible wires had released her, and she was allowed to sit back again and regain her position in the chair she frequented during their sessions. She was shaking again, but it had nothing to do with the narrative that he was spinning. Winter was not in control now, was out of control in a way that she rarely was, and she hated it. She hated feeling used, feeling like a pawn in someone's game. And when he got up, she was ashamed at the way she shrank back from him. "Who am I?" he yelled at her, his face suddenly very close to hers, and Pamela Winters shook as she tried to answer him. "You're the writer. You write. It's what you've always done." He didn't seem to like this answer, and he threw the end table that separated them aside as he stepped in close enough that their foreheads nearly touched. "But who is that?" he yelled in her face, his voice cracking as if the answer was the most important thing in the world to him. "I don't know," she said. She wanted to say more, but it was all there was to say, really. His cruel eyes cleared then, and he seemed to realize that he was looming over her. He straightened his shirt, looked at the mess that he had made in his confusion, before nodding and turning to leave. "Thank you, Dr. Winters. I do so look forward to our sessions. Please, bill me for whatever you think is proper. I must get back to my work." He left then, but Pamela Winters did not. She sat there and felt small and terrified, unsure of her own reality, until her phone rang, and she realized it was nearly midnight. Maggie was so worried. She wanted to know what had happened, and Winter did something that she had never done before. She told a lie. She told Maggie that there had been an emergency and that she'd gotten swept up in it. She was sorry. She would be home right away, and Maggie said she felt silly for being so afraid. She would come see her soon, and then she hung up. Winter went to the bathroom and fixed herself. She couldn't let Maggie see her like this, and she would certainly never tell her what the writer had said or done. Maggie's reality was fragile enough sometimes, and the last thing she needed was Winter shaking the unsteady edifice of her mental health. She would try her best to forget this encounter, as she always did, and after a time she would succeed. But no matter how successful, she would always remember again the next time she found herself around the strange young old man and his odd ways. It was the lowest point of my life, and I spent years thinking it was some kind of divine retribution. After last week, I know better. I would say it had been a hard year, but it had really been a hard 5 years. COVID knocked me out of a job that I really liked. Lack of a job meant I had defaulted on my mortgage, and I'd finally been forced to sell my pickup truck when I couldn't even afford gas. I was homeless for real then, just wandering around and taking what I could get. And as the economy got a little better and the businesses started opening again, my lack of decent clothes held me back from much of anything besides day labor. I was stuck in a rut, and I didn't know how to get back out. Not until I met the guy in the 3-piece suit. I was coming out of a convenience store as he went in, and when we bumped into each other, it felt like I'd been electrocuted. I'd been doing a little panhandling, not something that I'm proud of, and some nice lady had given me a 5-spot as long as I wouldn't spend it on the booze. $5 was enough for a slightly expired sandwich and a bottle of water, so I headed down to Enzo's, where I bumped into Mr. Suit Guy. He looked like a real business type, one of those guys who traded stocks or owned a company, and I nearly dropped my deli sandwich in my cold water as he slammed against me. I just figured he would bowl past me and keep going, but I was 3 or 4 steps out of the door when I felt eyes watching me. I turned back to find him looking at me in a thunderstruck way. I didn't like it. It was more than most people had seen. I felt seen in a way that I hadn't in years, like someone was finally looking at me and thinking more than effing bum, and it honestly felt a little nice. Right up until he started yelling. Hey, get back here. You bumped into me. Get your ass back here and bump me again. I need it. But whatever else he was saying, I didn't hear. I started running, clutching my food and running flat out. I didn't know what this was about, but
I knew that if the cops came by, they'd side with Mr. Gray Suit over a smelly bum any day. The guy chased me for a little over a block, shoving other people aside, too, as he kept yelling at me to come back and bump into him again. And it took me almost 10 minutes to lose him. When some cop came around out of a coffee shop on Melvin and the guy bumped into them, I made my way down a side street and finally got away. That had been weird, I reflected, but people usually treated the homeless like punching bags, so it wasn't out of the ordinary. I sat down to have my sandwich, and as I peeled back the wrapper, I reached for the mustard in my pocket. My fingers touched something else, though, and I pulled out not a mustard packet, but a scratch ticket. I didn't play scratchers. I didn't have the money to, so I was a little confused as to how it had come to be in my pocket. So I decided to scratch it. Why not? I hadn't stolen it, so I didn't need to feel bad about it. If the guy in the suit had dropped it in when he bumped me, then that was just tough for him. I started getting excited as I scratched the numbers, and when I finished the last box, the ticket almost slipped out of my hand. I had scratched off $1,000 on what amounted to a $2 ticket. I couldn't believe it. This kind of thing never happened to me. I had been living in a state of misfortune for so long that a little windfall seemed unfathomable. I took it to a different gas station to cash it in, not wanting to risk running into the man a second time, and the clerk told me how lucky I was as he cashed me out. He asked if I wanted another ticket, and after thinking about it, I decided that I might as well. There was no harm in playing another. It was only $2. I scratched it and felt my hands begin to shake. I'd won another $5,000. That was how it went after that. Whether I played dice in an alley or cards at a high-end casino, I won. Soon I was back on my feet, my luck with jobs turning around, and within a year, I was the owner of my own business. As I started to do well with my small-scale gambling, I let a coworker talk me into putting some money into cryptocurrency. I did so well with it that I started day trading, and when the GameSpot stock came up in conversation, I put my money in and cashed out at the peak. I also met someone at work, a woman with a young son who needed stability, and we decided to start a life together. I couldn't believe it. I had gone from living under park benches to owning my own home again and getting my life back on track. My business did well. My ventures always panned out. Everything I touched turned to gold. By the start of 2025, I was doing public outreach in the same areas where I'd once slept and begged for money. And that was how I came to see the man that I had bumped into again. I was walking around a soup kitchen, which I had recently taken on as a charitable venture, when I saw him eating with some of the other guys at the shelter. Life had clearly not been good to him since the last time we'd bumped into each other. He was haggard, his hair long and his clothes disheveled. The gray suit was long gone, and he looked as if many of the familiar bus terminals and underpass spots that I had slept in were now known to him. He looked up when he saw me, our eyes meeting, and I could see the recognition on his face. The spoon slipped out of his hand, his head following me as the manager of the shelter walked me around. And as I looked away, I could feel those eyes boring into me. I started seeing him more often after that. It seemed that some days, every door I opened, every sidewalk I went down, and every building that I had reason to visit, there he was. He seemed to be trying to bump into me, but I was always aware of my surroundings in a strange way I never had been before. Some of it was just not wanting to bump into people and make them angry, a trick I learned from when I was homeless, but some of it was just being aware of myself. I always managed to step out of his way or step to the side so he could go by, and
Every time it seemed to frustrate him. The day before things came to a head, saw him getting vocally angry with me when I opened the door to the bank for him instead of just crashing into him, and I was pretty confused as I watched him walk away. I was coming home late the next night when I found him sitting in my living room. My wife and son were out of town, a last-minute visit to her parents' house, and that would seem lucky too. I didn't have security for my penthouse home. I never felt like I needed it, until I came home that evening to find him in it. I was tempted to step back out into the hallway and run, but the gun pointed at me was a pretty good deterrent. He told me to sit down, and I took a seat across from him. I couldn't tell you why, but it felt like the right thing to do. "You remember me?" he asked, and I nodded. "I bumped into you about 10 years ago, just about the time my luck changed." "Right, except it didn't change. You took my luck." I furrowed my brow. How was that even possible? He looked over my shoulder at a decanter of alcohol, scotch or bourbon or something, and said he was going to make a glass before starting. I told him to go ahead, and he held the gun on me as he poured out amber liquid and took a sip. He brought it back, not offering me one, and sat it down on the coffee table without a coaster. Jerk. I don't know how it started, but I got the luck from my uncle. He was a businessman, a compulsive gambler, and everything he touched seemed to turn to gold. He was lucky in life, lucky in love, and everything seemed to come up his way. I asked him once how he did it, and he told me it had just randomly happened one day. He'd been recently drafted into Vietnam, and he went to celebrate what would likely be the last time that he saw his friends. He bumped into a guy coming out of a bar. After that, his luck was insane. He never so much as took a bullet the whole war. Came home, invested in a used car lot in his hometown, and turned it around. Everything he touched turned to gold, and he could do no wrong. He told me that he believed it had been that guy he bumped into, and he wanted to test it by giving it to me. He'd never had any kids, always thought of me as the son that he never had, and he wanted to give me his luck as a graduation present. So, he bumped into me, just slammed his shoulder into me right there in the living room. And I was lucky after that. I was lucky right up until you stole it from me. After that night, everything changed. I got arrested for trying to get you. The cops said I was disturbing the peace, and when they took me in, I refused to stop long enough to talk to them. I stayed in jail for 6 months while they tried to figure out what to do with me. And the people I left to watch my business suddenly decided to take the money and run. I was destitute when I got out. My fiancée had drained my accounts. My friends wouldn't talk to me now that I was broke. I had nothing. I'd nearly forgotten about you, just chalked it up to bad luck. And that was when I saw you again. He took another long drink, smacked his lips, and went to get the decanter. He brought it back, not even bothering with the glass anymore, and seemed to enjoy sipping from the glass neck of the thing. You forget how nice things are when you're living rough. A nice bourbon, cigar on the balcony, a steak cooked just the way you want it. Anyway, after I saw you at the shelter, I knew I had to get my luck back. I kept trying to bump into you, but I think you'd figured out by then that the bump was how you'd gotten it in the first place. I was getting frustrated, not sure how to get you to give it back, and finally, I decided that this was the best way to go. So, he said,
cocking the cheap little revolver. "You're going to bump into me. You're going to give me my luck back. Then I'm going to leave. You can call the police if you like. I'll have the luck, so I don't care." "And if I don't?" I asked, still sitting comfortably on my couch. He shrugged. "Then I'll shoot you, and neither of us will have it. Either way, your turn with the luck is over." He was slurring a little by then, the alcohol taking effect, and I decided to trust in the luck and see if it would pan out. "Then I guess you'll have to shoot me," I said, spreading my arms out and inviting him to take the shot. He looked mad. Asshole. I didn't want it to be like... But I never found out what he wanted it to be like. He seemed to have forgotten that the coffee table was there, and when his shin bumped into it, he fell forward and through the glass top. The gun fell out of his limp fingers, the alcohol spilling on the carpet, as he gurgled with the shards of the tabletop in his guts. He looked up at me, pleading for me to help him, but it was too late. I called the police, but it seemed my luck wasn't going to work for him. He was dead before they got there. The whole thing was written up as a home invasion gone wrong. The fella had a record, a lot of loitering and panhandling mostly, and they supposed that he had simply stepped up to the next means of getting a hot meal. I didn't tell them what we'd talked about. I figured it would only muddy the waters further. Now, however, I'm stuck with the idea that I might be able to transfer this luck. My son, who I adopted at the start of last year, is 10, so I've got a little time to figure it out. I've started putting money in accounts under my wife's name, just in case. If the luck means I have to lose what I've gained, then maybe I can set them up well enough that they can live comfortably, no matter what happens. If it's true, and I can transfer the luck, then maybe I'll give it to my son when he comes of age. Luck is a pretty good gift for a young man starting out in the world. Till then, I'll just have to be careful who I bump into. I don't know if this actually happened or not, but it's something I dream about sometimes. When I was in grade school, my family lived in a large apartment complex. My parents were not doing well, I guess. My mom was a cashier at a grocery store, and my dad worked at a gas station. They weren't bad parents, not by any means, and I remember a lot of happy times in our little apartment. We had Christmas mornings and movie nights and a lot of weekends spent on the couch with Dad watching cartoons. Dad worked nights, so I usually spent a few hours in the morning with him before he went to bed, and I spent my evenings with him and Mom before I went to bed. The apartment complex we lived at was big, with lots of kids to play with and places to explore. But the best feature was the blacktop basketball court that seemed to stretch on forever to my 5-year-old mind. It started near the front of my building and went all the way to the dumpster where Daddy took the garbage. I drew hopscotch boards out there. I played basketball with some of the other kids. And the blacktop generally became whatever we needed it to be. It was our play field more days than not, and we never thought about it much outside of what games we would play that day on it. I remember getting off the bus and finding the chalk, but it's also in that strangely dreamy way that little kid stuff sometimes happens. I was walking home, wondering if I had any chalk left to make a hopscotch board, when I saw something in the ditch across from the complex. It was soggy looking, but we had learned a while ago that sometimes the soggy boxes fell out of the trucks and they had stuff in them. The year before, my friends and I had found some old coins in a lockbox that was next to the road, and we traded them for ice cream. Another time, we found a suitcase full of adult clothes that we used to play house. The box was floating on top of the old puddle water, and I found a stick so that I could nudge it over to the side of the ditch. I gasped. It was a box of chalk. It wasn't colored chalk. I had some stubs left from a big box I'd gotten for my birthday, but a box like the teachers used at school. The box was ruined, but the chalk was fine, and I scooped it up and took it with me. My friends were just getting off the bus from their school, and when I held up the chalk, they all cheered. Most of our parents were making it paycheck to paycheck, so things like sidewalk chalk and new toys usually took a backseat to clothes and food and shoes. "What should we do?" Randall asked, as we came into the complex's stairwell. "We could draw a comic," Mimi suggested. "Or a hopscotch board," Kelsey said. "Or make an obstacle course with these things that you can jump over and move around," Dwayne piped up. "We can do all of that," I said. "We've got until dinner time. That's loads of time." To us, the 4 hours until dinner seemed like an eternity, and the afternoon could hold all kinds of secrets. We put our backpacks in our houses and headed to the blacktop. There were a few other kids there already, jumping rope or shooting baskets, and I divvied up the chalk amongst us. Between me and Mimi and Randall and Dwayne, Kelsey, Rebecca, Kelsey's sister, and Carter, another friend of ours, there was enough for each of us to have 2 pieces with 2 left over. The chalk was regular school chalk, not very big or sturdy, but I remember thinking that it was something special. It was the way the light hit it, I think. When you held it up, it just seemed special somehow, like God had sent it just for us. Dwayne and Carter and Randall set about making an obstacle course, while Mimi and I lay in the shady part of the court and drew characters. It was a little cooler there, the concrete warming our fronts as we drew, and the afternoon slipped on as the shade from the tree slipped farther and farther across the blacktop. We chased it, drawing characters on the hot top as it cooled, and watching Kelsey and Rebecca draw endless grids that they never seemed to jump in. That was pretty normal for them, actually. I think they enjoyed drawing the boards more than they enjoyed playing hopscotch. And as our characters went about their adventures, we heard them arguing over rules. It was getting on in the afternoon by the time they finally started jumping, and that was when the trouble started. Dwayne and Randall had a pretty good obstacle course set up, even if it just consisted of jumping over and around lines on the ground, and Carter had decided to watch, sitting in the grass and keeping time. He would watch them go, keeping time on his old Seiko watch, and tell them how long it had taken them to finish. Dwayne was a little faster, but only because Randall was getting tired. We had sketched across the blacktop by this point, and had even started squatting so we could draw on the parts where the sun was still too hot to lay on. Kelsey and Rebecca had finally decided on some rules for their hopscotch game, and Kelsey was getting ready to go first. I didn't see it when it happened, but I did hear the rock hit the blacktop before she started jumping. Someone called Rebecca's name, and I guess she turned to see who it was because she didn't see it either. I was listening to the chalk of Kelsey's shoes on the pavement. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then suddenly they stopped. I didn't think much about it, not until I heard a sad little voice not far behind me. "Kelsey?" I turned around, just finishing on the teeth of a really cool dinosaur, and saw Rebecca looking around in confusion. "Where's Kelsey?" I asked, standing up from where I'd been squatting. "I don't know," Rebecca said, looking around. "I turned to say hi to Mary Beth, and she was gone when I looked back." I glanced around, but I didn't see her either. There weren't a lot of places to hide here. It was just blacktop, and I can't imagine where Kelsey could have gone so quickly. "Could she have gone home?" I asked Rebecca. "I don't think so," the little girl said. "Well, why don't you go see if she's there and let us know? If she comes back, I'll tell her that you went looking for her." Rebecca nodded, clearly a little freaked out, and left. The boys seemed to have run themselves out because Randall was laying on the pavement and panting like a dog. That gave me an idea. I took my chalk and went to draw his outline. I remember thinking that the chalk had barely been worn down at all, and thought again how special it must be. Randall looked at me as I started to draw, laying still so I could get a decent outline. It was like one of those shows where the police were standing around a chalk outline on the ground, though I didn't know what it meant just yet. "Do me next," Carter said, coming to lay down not far from Randall before hopping up and saying the pavement was too hot. He was still looking for a good spot when I finished the outline, and something astonishing happened. I had sat back to see it, and Randall was getting ready to sit up when he suddenly dropped into the concrete, like he'd fallen into a hole. I knelt there, just looking at the spot for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of what had happened. "Hey, are you going to come do me too?" Carter said, sitting up and looking at the spot. "Hey, where did Randall go?" I fell onto my butt, looking at the spot, and soon I was running for home. My mind was racing, trying to find some reason why this would have happened, and I was equally as afraid that I would be in trouble. I'd made the outline, and if I couldn't make Randall come back, then they'd blame me. All I could think to do was go home. Home was like base and tag. Once you got there, you were safe, and nothing could get you. I could hear the other kids calling my name, but I needed to feel safe more than I needed to talk to them. Mom asked if something was wrong when I came running in, but I didn't stop. I went to my room and closed the door, sitting under the window as my mind raced. I was going to be in so much trouble when the other kids told an adult. It was all my fault, but I wasn't sure how. What had I done? How had I done it? Would Randall ever come back? I could see it getting dark behind me as the afternoon petered out, and when Mom called my name, I came slowly out of my room. "Hey, sweetie, are you okay? You came in so suddenly." "Yeah," I said, trying to play it cool. If they hadn't told Mom, then maybe no one had thought I had done it. "Well, dinner's almost ready. I don't think your dad is joining us. He's not feeling well and says he's probably not going to work today. Hey, can you do me a favor and take the trash out? I know he'd appreciate it." I looked at the bag of trash and felt my belly squirm. I'd have to cross the blacktop to get to the dumpster, and it would be dark out there now. There were no lights out on the blacktop, and other than the lights in the parking lot, it would be very dark out there. I was less afraid of the dark by this point and more afraid of the blacktop. Would it disappear me too, like it had done to Randall? I didn't know, but I couldn't refuse without giving my mom a pretty good reason why. I grabbed the bag and set out across the blacktop, wanting to be done with it as quickly as possible. The court seemed to stretch on forever in the dark, the black asphalt feeling strange underfoot without the sun overhead. I passed Randall's outline, and the sight of it gave me a shiver. It felt like looking at a dead body, and I wanted to go far around it when I came back. I couldn't help but look at the ribbon of comic characters Mimi and I had done, but they looked different in the low light cast by the parking lot overheads. Were they moving? They looked like they were moving, but it was in that way that things move when you look at them for too long. They moved in that dreamy way that things move on hot days, and it was hard to tell what was happening. I was breathing very hard. I felt like I might hyperventilate, and I needed to get home before I collapsed. I didn't want to stick around long enough to find out what could be happening out here. I tossed the bag into the dumpster, my ordeal half over, but it wasn't over yet. I came back to the edge of the blacktop, and that's when I saw the hopscotch board. It was massive, stretching all the way back from one end to the other, and on a whim, I decided to jump over the square in front of me. It wasn't a big jump, but I must have come down wrong because my heel fell inside the square, and suddenly I lost my balance. I spun my arms trying to right myself, and luckily I fell left instead of back. I hissed as I skinned my elbow on the pavement, but that wasn't the weirdest part. I looked down to find my leg dipping into the box that had been chalked into the pavement, and I breathed a sigh of relief when I pulled it out. I was scared now. I started running as I tried to make it back home. I didn't know what was happening, but I wanted to feel safe again. Home was safe. Nothing could get you at home, but as I passed the ribbon of characters, I saw that I hadn't been mistaken earlier. They were moving, reaching for me with their oddly defined limbs, and the dinosaur that I had drawn was snapping his jaws at me as it glowered. They were moving painfully slow across the blacktop, coming for me, and I jumped over them as I kept running. They were too slow to get me, and I was too scared to slow down. As I passed by the outline of Randall, I thought I heard someone softly crying and felt the dread rise up inside me like a tide. I came barreling into the apartment, crying and yelling for my mother to help me. She wrapped me in a hug, asking what was wrong as she tried to calm me down. I must have been pretty loud because my sick father came staggering out of the bedroom to ask what was wrong. Mom clearly couldn't get anything coherent out of me, so after trying in vain to get me to eat dinner, she just put me to bed and lay with me as Dad went back to bed. Later that evening, someone called Mom, and she got up to take the call in the other room. I was supposed to be asleep, but couldn't help but hear when she talked to Randall's mother about how he hadn't come home yet. His mother must have been pretty worried, because I heard my mom telling Mrs. Gaff that she was sure that he was just at someone's house, and she'd find him any minute now. I yawned, drifting off as I hoped it would all turn out to be a dream. I woke up the next morning to find police scouring the area and asking everyone about the 2 missing kids. Kelsey, as it turned out, hadn't just gone home, and I now felt pretty sure that she had fallen into the hopscotch board, like I had almost done the night before. They asked me if I knew what had happened to my friends, and I told them I didn't know where they had gone. I told them I had seen them on the blacktop the day before, and when I turned back to point at it, I saw that all the drawings were gone. One of the maintenance guys had probably seen our mess and used a hose to clean it up. It was all gone. Even the outline of Randall was gone. No one ever found a trace of Randall or Kelsey, and my parents moved away not long after. Mom got a promotion at work, and Dad got a different job that paid better and let him work a 9-to-5, so he'd be home nights. They said the neighborhood seemed less safe after the 2 kids went missing, and they were worried that I might go missing too. A lot of people left after that, actually, and I heard that the apartment complex almost closed. I never saw the blacktop again after that, but I still dream about it sometimes. I'm older now. I know that people don't just disappear into chalk drawings, but if it's just a dream, then why do I remember it so vividly?